again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal. Three in the face, 1-1. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So I think for me, if I was a professional basketball player playing for one of the biggest franchises in the country in one of the most important games of my young career, I would probably try to score more than 14 points. But I guess Jason Tatum is just built different than I am. 14 points. He went 1 for 4 from 3, 5 of 13 from the field. He only took 13 shots in a Game 7 elimination. He was on the floor for 42 minutes. 42 minutes, and he only took 13 shots. He had almost as many rebounds as a shooting guard. Small forward, whatever, he's a shooting guard.
Yeah.
He had almost as many rebounds as he did field goal attempts. That is embarrassing.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I would never show my
His
face
other
in fucking public.
Game 7, the last round, he dropped like 51, didn't he? In round 1 or round 2?
Yeah, who was that against?
I don't even remember.
Wasn't that the Knicks?
It was the Knicks. I didn't know if it was
So a
Milwaukee
team that doesn't
or not Milwaukee. That
isn't
was the Heat.
actually good.
No. It's maybe not the best meme, but my favorite meme every time Tatum throws up a dud is I don't remember when this was. Maybe it was the bubble, but he tweeted out or put on his Instagram story that like he texts Kobe before Game 7 is like, I got you today. Every time he throws up a dud, somebody photoshops Kobe texting him back like just lose my number or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now here's the thing, because it's always Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown had only 19 points. Not great. He's the number 2 guy on that team. He's got to play better. He had 5 fouls, almost fouled out. Again, not great. 5 assists, 8 rebounds, perfectly fine. He went 1 for 9 from 3. He took almost as many 3-pointers as Jason Tatum took fucking field goals. He was 8 for 23. 8 for 23. I have no problem with him getting up those shots.
Yeah.
This is why Jaylen Brown is better than Jason Tatum, which is a take that has aged so badly, and I will never let go because I hate Jason Tatum.
Yep.
He's a dork.
And they're going to trade Brown anyway.
They are going to trade Brown.
He's gone.
It's going to be so fun. They're going to trade Brown for like Carl Anthony Towns or something stupid.
Dame's coming to Boston.
No, that's what I want. I want Carl Anthony Towns and Jason Tatum both in a Game 5 next year. Just being like, I don't know what to do. Dorks. Absolute dorks. Anyways. Hi, Edward. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. Welcome back, everybody. It wouldn't be For Muddy Podcast lately without us talking about a completely different sport for the first minute and a half or two or 3 minutes here. But we got a lot to get into. It's been a while since we've touched base here, but we have the draft lottery review to get to. Talk about the Ducks getting second overall. Not so much what happened there. Maybe a bit about fucking Chicago getting Connor Bedard. But definitely a heavy debate that I've been looking forward to about Fantilli versus Carlsson. Maybe versus Michkov and Will Smith, and we'll talk those guys too. But it's been heavy Fantilli versus Carlsson, and it's just been amped up because they're both at the World Championships, right? Like I feel like that's spurred it on a lot. There was the talk was there to begin with, but I feel like right after the draft lottery was 100 or almost 100% Fantilli from like a lot of the experts. Like it was like 95% Fantilli. Then a couple athletic articles came out where they're like, well, okay, maybe not just yet. Like there's a few people out there and a few NHL scouts and NHL GMs who like Carlsson a lot, and it's not as set in stone as some people think. And then Carlsson got off to a kind of a better start, put in a better position for sure for Sweden at the World Championships. And he had 5 points in 8 games, 3 goals, centering the top line, playing with Lucas Raymond. That kind of started to push things in his direction, and then all it took is Fantilli to score a highlight reel goal, a game winner in the semifinals And he still finished with, I think, 4 points or 3 points in his run at the World Championships too.
22 shots, by the way.
Yeah, he played most of the tournament as a 13th forward as well.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, he put, like, the things that I took away, because I didn't get a chance to watch, but just the raw volume of shots that he was putting up, to me, was huge. Because that's just kind of an easy way to kind of assert yourself, even if it is from a depth role. I think we've all seen guys at even the highest levels, sometimes when they're in that bottom six role or, even the fourth line, like, they will cut down on the, like, kind of shots that they're getting off for more of a, like, discipline, kind of get it deep kind of game. And I think having this kind of tournament, which is supposed to be a best on best, skill against skill kind of thing, it allows your bottom six forwards to kind of play a little bit bigger. But also, that's a personal choice that he has to make. Like, I'm going to get shots on net. And I think last I saw, Scott Wheeler had it, he was at like 22 shots.
Yeah.
And I think Carlsson was somewhere around like 11 or 12.
29 pimps too.
Yeah, baby. Ducks are back.
Yeah. I think one of them was a 10-minute misconduct too. So a hit to the head, or they deemed it wasn't malicious, so he didn't get suspended. But
not supposed to do that.
No.
Allegedly.
But yeah, I'm super excited for that, because it's not that I don't like Leo Carlsson, but I've always felt throughout the year that there's a gap there, and we'll get into it. But what Carlsson did was amazing, and not discounting that. But I mean, there's for me a decent gap. I think Fantilli is closer to Bedard than Carlsson's closer to Fantilli, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? He's closer to number one than Carlsson is close to number two. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
it does absolutely make sense. Here's
go
real quick. I just want to read this tweet from Scott from Saturday. So 8 a.m. on Saturday. Adam Fantilli's men's world so far: 9 games played, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, plus 3, 22 shots on goal. Okay. Leo Carlsson's men's world completed. Not his fault. They just didn't go as far. 8 games played, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points, plus 5. 12 shots on goal. Adam Fantilli played 12 minutes and 11 seconds. Leo Carlsson played 15 minutes and 38 seconds. That must be their average.
Yes.
Like a night.
Sorry, it was. What was their average again? What was the difference there? Because I didn't see that. It was
about 3.5 minutes. 12:11 for Fantilli and 15:40 for Carlsson. Okay. And Fantilli almost doubled up shot attempts or shots on goal in 3.5 less minutes. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, when the games that I did watch, and I wasn't able to watch all of them, for both teams, Fantilli wasn't obviously used as much. A lot of, like we said at the start of the tournament, was the 13th forward. But when he was on the ice, he was making things happen. Like, he was, again, like, there's the shot volume there, you can see that, but his play driving ability, the power forward, the power drive that he has kind of driving to the net with his speed and skill, that was on full display. And it's not that Leo Carlsson wasn't doing things, because I feel like, again, he has, I don't know if it's a higher floor, but Fantilli definitely has the higher ceiling. Their floors are fairly similar, but Leo Carlsson's going to be an NHL player. He's got the size and skill and average NHL speed that he'll make it. But you look again at who he was playing with, the goals that he did score, the points that he did pick up. He was making plays, and there were some moments I watched him. I said, this kid is really good, and there's a reason that he's in the discussion for number 2. But again, he's playing with Lucas Raymond. The goals that he had were kind of set up on a plate for him. I think when you look at the point totals at the end of the day and you say, well, wow, 5 points in 8 games, it is great. I think it was like the 10th highest draft-eligible production at the World Championships, tied with Yager. So it is impressive. But he was put in a position to succeed and to do that. Where, again, Adam Fantilli, a lot of the criticism he got at the World Juniors were, look at the points that Bedard put up versus Fantilli. Well, he was used as a third-line checking forward at the World Junior Championships. He didn't get the opportunities that Bedard got. He didn't get the power play time that Bedard got. Not to say that he'd put up the same amount of points, but he didn't. And it's the same again at at the World Championships. He didn't get the opportunities that Carlsson got to put up those point totals, but he sure did impress when he was on the ice, and he earned his way up the lineup. I think in the semifinal and definitely in the final, he was playing with Cody Glass. He was playing top 6 minutes. His ice time went up, so he did earn the opportunity to kind of build his way up in the lineup.
Hearing you say back-to-back, he was playing with Cody Glass, and he was playing top 6 minutes. It's just...
Yeah, shows you how many guys want to go to the Worlds,
funny.
right? So.
God, that's so funny. So, okay. I agree with what you said. But the counterpoint I guess you can make in Carlsson's favor, right, when you say he was being set up by a player like Lucas Raymond. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's Lucas Raymond's job, right? Yep. And that's one of the things we love about his game is that offensive creativity, his ability to make plays for himself and for others and, really kind of put guys in a position to succeed. And it is a skill being able to finish those opportunities. You know what I mean? You can put guys who know where to be, and if they can't finish it, it means nothing. So the fact that Carlsson is able to finish those opportunities off is absolutely a mark in his favor, and it's always nice to have somebody whose floor is so high because their foundation is so strong. I think all of that's legit. And if you're Anaheim, you can certainly make the argument that having a player like Zegras, who has that same kind of, high-end offensive creativity, bending defenses and things like that, is a perfect player to play with Carlsson. And there's not a guarantee Carlsson plays center, so even Carlsson could play the wing, leaving Zegras to play center, yep. Which seems, blah, 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 blah. But I think one of the things that we're learning more and more over the years is that when it comes down to big picture defensive structure, or I guess when it comes down to trying to project defense, I think a coach can help lessen some of the gap on defense easier than it is lessening the gap on offense. And Fantilli is a good defensive player. It's not that he's a bad defensive player. So it's not working from a deficit. It's working from just a slightly lower level, but the offense is higher. And his ability to impact the game, at both ends in that way is a little bit higher. So, yeah, sorry.
No, 100%. Before we're gonna literally get right back.
Let's just do it right now.
We're gonna get right back into it. I just want to briefly say what the rest we're covering, so everybody kind of knows what we're getting into today. We do have to get to the Ducks coaching search update. It's not a major update, but we're going to get into some of the details there who seem to be the front runners at this point. And then we're going to dive into some updates from around the NHL. We're going to talk playoffs, which we now know after tonight what the finals are going to be with Florida and Vegas. We're going to talk about Kyle Dubas's firing and that whole weird situation in Toronto with him and Shanahan and the press conferences and how it led to him apparently getting fired and now looks to be in the running for the Pittsburgh Penguins job. And then the Arizona Coyotes arena situation we're going to get to as well. And we also have the prospect season review. I don't know if we're going to make it to that.
I don't know. That might be another.
That might have to be another episode because I feel like a lot of this is going to take some time. But we do have a season review for all the Ducks prospects, which if we do have to push it, it's not a big deal. The Memorial Cup's going on. Zellweger and Gauthier both in the Memorial Cup right now. So if we have to push it, we can always just include those games. But that's what's on.
Still not sure that's how you say his name.
Gauthier.
Don't think it's a T. Still don't think it's
Gauthier.
It's Gauthier.
Gauthier. I don't know. We need to get a French Canadian on here.
Yeah.
Because we're both.
Anybody knew that Simon Benoit? Simon Benoit.
Benoit Olivier Giroux is my first guy to cover too. So there we go. Anyway, back to Fantilli versus Carlsson versus Michkov versus Will Smith. We'll get to those guys, but yeah, man. I thought they were both equally impressive at the World Championships, given their roles and where they were kind of placed in the lineup. Again, Carlsson was put as the number one center for a reason. He had one of the most impressive draft-eligible seasons in the SHL in its history. He's 6'3". He combines kind of speed, physicality, makes highlight reel plays. He's got the skill. He's not just kind of a one-trick pony in that sense where he's a big, fast, physical kid. He's got the skill to go along with that. He showed that in the SHL this year. He showed that at the World Juniors with 6 points in 7 games. He showed that at the World Championships like we've just talked about. As far as NHL-ready prospects go, him and Fantilli are probably the two guys closest to the NHL in terms of just being able to be physically ready to go and then going along with the skill to do that as well. Bedard on a skill level, we all know he's ready. But again, on the physical side of things, you don't know, right? We saw Jack Hughes take a couple years to break into the NHL because physically he just wasn't ready to get in there. Now Bedard's skill level might be on a whole nother planet compared to Hughes, and that's saying something. So his NHL readiness kind of just goes with the skill that he has. But Carlsson and Fantilli definitely, from an all-around standpoint, are the closest to the NHL. So there's a reason he's in this conversation. But for me, the separating factor is the ceiling of both players. I think Leo Carlsson can be, a 1B type center, almost like a Barkov light type player.
Ryan O'Reilly, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like where they are, again, Ryan O'Reilly, I think is a good example there. He's not an elite number one center in the National Hockey League, but when he was at his prime, you would still say he was a 1B on a team that didn't have, an elite, Crosby, Malkin, McDavid type player on their team, right? A guy who's a superstar in this league.
Yeah, I think, for me, I think with Ryan O'Reilly, the way I always looked at it is he is good enough to be your best center, but you need to have the supporting offensive firepower around him, because if you're not getting that kind of high-level offensive production from your first-line center, which he can produce at high levels, like he's always been a good player, but like that's not the peak of his value, then that's why having like a Tarasenko was always so important, because then you just got someone who can just go and fill the net. So, but yeah, like if Leo Carlsson turns into Ryan O'Reilly, whoever gets him is going to be ecstatic. That is a great player to have. The problem is that the guy that he's up against is Adam Fantilli, and I mean, what is the ceiling comp for Fantilli? Like, is it Matthews?
Yeah, you're hearing Matthews, McKinnon in terms of modern day power forwards who do it all, right? And speed, skill, size, strength, right? Like that's what you're getting.
Like, is it Rantanen?
Essentially, right? Like you're again, those are the comps you hear are the bigger, skilled. Yeah. Matthews isn't the quickest player, but you know what I mean, the all-around guys, and that's the conversation Fantilli is getting himself put in is Matthews and McKinnon, and I've seen. It's not the best comp because of the era difference, but you've seen Lindros comparisons go around. He's definitely not a Lindros at junior level. Like Lindros' junior season was ridiculous, right? It was unheard of. But that's the conversations you're hearing Fantilli get put into. And again, I'm not a big comparison guy. I don't like comparisons too much. But when you get some of the smarter guys out there saying like this is the level that this guy can get to, makes you think a little bit. And again, like there's not many weaknesses to Carlsson's game either. So saying when I say I like Fantilli a lot more than Carlsson, it's not really a detriment to Leo Carlsson by any means. I mean, he's got elite IQ, there's no problems with his work ethic, puck protection, skill, playmaking ability.
Seems like a quality dude.
He's not a bad skater, which is usually a knock on things. Like Fantilli might be one of the best skaters in the draft, which is unbelievable. And Carlsson's not a bad skater by any means. He's got a real good smooth skating stride. His top speed's not the best. It's about at an average level, which is where you maybe start to get some separation between Fantilli on skill set wise. But other than that, like other than his top speed not being near the top of the class, it was the only other knock that maybe he might not be a center. Like that's the only other knock I can really get at with Leo Carlsson. And then how will the offense translate to the NHL level? Will he have the game-breaking skill at the NHL level to be a 60, 70, 80-point guy, right? Like those are probably the separating factors for me.
Yeah, I feel like those. I think you're 100% right. And when you say like, what are your concerns if you're looking at Leo Carlsson? First, I think is he a center, right? And okay, you go from there.
Yeah.
Second, it's does he have the raw offensive potential compared to his peers in that part of the draft, right? Like there are guys who I think we could argue are going to be more offensively productive just by their nature farther down in the draft, but they are not as good or impactful as we expect Leo Carlsson to be. So within the context of his peers, how does his offense translate? You know, and then again, like the skating thing. But even then, like we've seen him play at a very high level. He was what? I mean, he kind of fucking Adam Fantilli'd the SHL or whatever it was, where he put up like an insane draft year that had him up there with, I think it was like
Sedins, pretty much.
The Sedins and
Backstrom, I think.
No, maybe Backstrom, but the dude from the Leafs from forever a fuck ago.
Sundin?
Sundin,
Yeah.
I think it was like, or maybe that's just more of like who he gets comped to.
Yeah.
I think that might have been what
I know
it is. But people look at him as like a Matt Sundin.
on like a points per game in the SHL draft eligible season, it was like the Sedins were the only guys who had better points per game totals in their draft eligible season in the SHL than Leo Carlsson did, which is unbelievable when you think of the players that have come through there. Some of the top Swedish prospects over the last few years, like Elias Lindholm had an exceptional draft eligible season. Carlsson had a better season than that. Think of some of the other guys. Again, we mentioned Backstrom and a few others that have come through. It was just the Sedins that had better draft eligible seasons than Leo Carlsson, which is saying something. It's crazy when you look at like the records that Bedard broke in the WHL, and then Fantilli goes out and has an NCAA season that is only bested in the last 2 or 3 decades by Paul Kariya. Better than Jack Eichel, who had he had a better season than Jack Eichel. Fantilli.
Oh, did he really?
Points per game basis, he had a better season. He's the only 3 freshmen have ever won the Hobey Baker, and that's Kariya,
got it. Now I remember.
Eichel, and Fantilli. But on a points per game basis, Fantilli had a better year. And I think we might have talked about this before, but or I think I might have sent you a message on this in terms of line mates and players that they played with and guys in the top 15 or 20 or 25 of NCAA scoring. In Eichel's season, he had Evan Rodriguez, who I think was ranked 3rd as well, and there was a few other guys within that top 15. And you look at Fantilli, it was 2 other players, I think, that were ranked, teammates that were ranked in the top 20 of scoring. So it was largely on his back this year, being the key contributor for that team. Not to say he didn't have a lot of support, but in comparison to Eichel, so really it's Paul Kariya. And for Carlsson, it's the Sedins, and for Fantilli, it's Paul Kariya of guys you can compare with the seasons they had. So it's unbelievable to look at these 3 players that you're looking at going at 1, 2, 3 in this year's draft. And we've heard this in Fantilli's case. In almost any other year, he would be an easy number 1 overall. And in some cases, in some of the weaker drafts we've seen, you can make that case with Leo Carlsson as well. With the resume he's put up this year, and why he's getting in the conversation for number 2 is it's such an exceptional resume he's put together in his draft eligible season that it's just so happens that he has 2 guys that have done the same thing, if not better this year. That is the reason he's at number 3.
Okay, so let me ask this question. Is it safe to say that any of those 3 go first overall in any of this draft? Sorry, ignore this draft. Any of the last 3 drafts, if any single one of them was in any of those drafts, they go first overall. They go ahead of Power. They go ahead of Slafkovsky.
Yeah.
And they go ahead of, who's the other one I'm missing? Lafreniere?
Yeah.
No, that was 4 ago or 3 ago?
I think that would have been 2020, right?
Or
2021,
okay. Yeah, 2020.
So, yeah.
I don't know, whatever. But yeah, so...
Owen Power was 2021.
Slafkovsky,
so.
Power, and then Lafreniere.
Yeah, Lafreniere would have been 2020. So.
Okay. And Leo Carlsson goes ahead of all of those guys, right? The only one I think you argue with is maybe Owen Power.
Even then, I still don't think so.
I think Carlsson would go ahead of
in terms of like historic seasons. I think he goes ahead of him. I mean, listen, I think if you go back to even Jack Hughes' draft, he's in the conversation for number 1 more than Capo Caco is.
Oh, for sure.
Right? So, like, even then, and you could say potentially he could be the number 1 in that
I think
draft.
he might go over Jack Hughes just because of the defense and the size.
Yeah.
He probably goes ahead of... And I'm not even saying that I agree with it per se, but if you're just looking at them as prospects, I do think GMs would lean towards the size that Carlsson provides, which is one of the reasons the Kakko Jack Hughes thing was even a conversation, was because of Kakko was NHL ready size-wise.
Well, you go back to 2018, Dalian Svechnikov. I think he's in the conversation there. 2017's Hischier, Nolan Patrick. I think he goes number 1 overall there, just based off his season. I think you go back to 2016, and that's where we start to say, okay, no, maybe not in front of Austin Matthews, right? Like that's that's the only debating factor there. But he's in the conversation maybe over Laine, or in the conversation with Laine at that point, right?
I mean, Carlsson would, I would say Carlsson goes ahead of Dubois.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I think in hindsight, Dubois probably goes second in that draft.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in hindsight, don't you take Dubois over Laine?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we're talking the last 7 years, the last 7 drafts,
so
that he's in the mix for number 1, which is crazy when you think of this is the guy who somebody's going to get at number 3 this year.
So here's the kind of, because like I was talking to you about this, about like there's like a weird logic game that's happening that's not making sense to me, and the way we just kind of walk through everything helps a lot as far as like setting it up and stuff. We've been hearing since before last year's draft, the top 2 of this year's draft is insane. Oh my God! Then we got, and it was Bedard and Michkov.
Yep.
Then we got a little bit past the draft, and everyone's like, this Fantilli kid's pretty special. And you're like, oh, okay. And then we got a little deeper into summer and some of the early, like, October, November kind of mock draft stuffs, and that's when you start hearing Leo Carlsson saying, watch out for this kid. He's playing really well. He had a good juniors, yada, yada. We roll into World Juniors in the center of the year, or the center of the season, beginning of the year, I guess. And it's, wow, Carlson's really pushing Fantilli. The Russia stuff, Michkov, there's going to be some questions. How far is he going to fall? Is this a Brad Lambert situation? Yada, yada, yada. He wasn't playing great for Sochi, or not Sochi. He wasn't playing great for
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg. Everything starts getting weird around. Okay, so we kind of got this top 4 potential-wise. It looks like the order is Bedard, Fantilli, and then it's a Michkov-Carlsson thing, and it's, do you take Carlsson? Do you take the winger? Michkov's the second best guy prospect in this. His offense is blah, 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 blah. And you kind of hear, throughout this time, you hear, Will Smith's a good number 5. He's going to be an interesting choice, for whoever's kind of after that 4. Like,
yeah,
he's going to be a good player. I think, in my head, the way I've kind of understood it and kind of what I've read and seen is he's a little bit like Logan Cooley without the high end, or without the skating. He's obviously not as good of a skater as Logan Cooley is, but he's that same kind of offensive, creative presence, that dynamic forward who can create for others and things like that. Great rumor at 5. We get a little farther into the season. Fucking Bedard number 1. Oh my God, it's all about Bedard. And then everybody, because we're hockey fans, we know better.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, top 3. This is what we're fighting for. Top 4 is great, but that's 3rd. If we can just lock in that 3rd spot, no matter what, great. Anaheim does the whole damn thing, suck beautifully. We get to the thing, we're like, all right, no matter what, we've got Leo Carlsson. Huge, great. Maybe something weird happens, whoever takes 2, maybe they like Carlsson over Fantilli and we end up with Fantilli. Probably not, but hey, it could happen. We've seen weird stuff. Shane Wright fell to 4 or whatever. And then the draft lottery happens. And it's, man, Bedard to Chicago. Can of worms, can of beans, not going there. Then it's us, and then it's Columbus. Immediate reaction, we got Fantilli. This is going to be great. We got Fantilli. Immediate reaction, Columbus, you know what? Columbus is a good place. They've got a good team. Leo Carlsson can come in there, fill the building, blah, blah, blah. You start to hear a little bit of rumors here and there, Oh, wonder if they could take Will Smith at 3.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Will Smith's name kind of creeps up into this. You're hearing a little bit of movement. You hear Benson. You hear Reinbacher, Sandin Felica. You hear all these different names kind of, what is the second half of the top 10 going to look like? It's going to be weird. I think like within like a 3-month span, we had Daniil Butt fall from like 9 to like 30. Like, it's just weird because it's silly season now. This is everything we do.
It's time, tournaments, and then absence of play from some other guys. And we see this every single year, right? And again, the timeline you break down is perfect there in the sense, okay, Bedard's number 1. We know he's number 1. He keeps doing things every year. Yeah, go.
Sorry. No. I just want to do, and then, but this is a conversation that's happening right now. And we get, in the last couple of weeks, we've heard 2 things. Carlsson could go at number 2. Will Smith could go at number 3. Carlsson could go at number 2. Will Smith could go at number 3. We have had a top 4 for fucking a year. At least 10 months we have had a top 4. We understand the Michkov thing. You take him out, that leaves you with a top 3. Carlsson could go number 2. Will Smith could go number 3. Everybody's saying it's not a lock at number 2. It's not a lock at number 2. Look at what Carlson's doing. What Fantilli's doing is incredible, but Carlsson is a legitimate prospect, and these are smart people who I trust and respect. Really good prospect. Don't sleep on it. It could get a little weird. Fine, whatever. I get it. Will Smith could go number 3. Ooh, Columbus could really use a dynamic offensive player like that. If Will Smith is good enough to go at number 3 instead of Leo Carlsson, and Leo Carlsson is good enough to go at number 2 instead of Adam Fantilli, how has Will Smith never been mentioned for number 2? This is just the last I wanted to wrap this up, and then you can go away because I've been rambling too long. But this is the part of this that I think when we get into micro conversations and comparisons, these things can happen, and I get it. But when we're making macro level analysis, we have to look at the way the whole picture comes together, because one of two things is true. Either Will Smith is the most underappreciated and underpraised player in years, like genuine years, because he's so good that he could go anywhere from 5 to 3, but not number 2, which is stupid. And everybody's just ignoring that he's actually probably could be the second best player in this draft. Or Carlsson isn't better than Fantilli. Like, it has to be one of the two. Either Will Smith is good enough to go second, or Carlsson isn't better than Fantilli. If it's a choice at 2, it has to still be a choice at 3. And if the logic for 3 for taking, give me a second, I want to say Cooley, Smith, if the logic for taking Smith at 3 is offensive firepower, how do you not take the guy who at 2, the argument for him over 3 is offensive firepower?
Yeah.
This is what I don't understand. So, sorry, I just feel like I've been going crazy and we haven't had a chance to talk about this, and it's been driving me crazy the way that this conversation has happened, because again, it's one of those things where you can watch the big picture change and all this stuff, and you can watch all the little conversations, but I think sometimes there's a disconnect between the two that we lose sight of. And again, it's either Will Smith is good enough to go number 2 or Leo Carlsson isn't. It has to be one of those two. And I think it should be considered fairly clear that Adam Fantilli is the number 2 prospect in this. He's the number 2 pick, because the only prospect I think who's better than him is Michkov, and we understand why you don't do that.
Yeah.
Now I just feel like I'm rambling and repeating myself. So
no, it's my point is kind of piggybacking off yours, and we see it every year because of the timing of certain tournaments, the under 18s, the World Championships, the World Juniors. It fluctuates a lot. Bedard has kind of had a stranglehold on number 1. There's really never been a conversation where anybody said that, despite, again, amazing seasons from Fantilli and Carlsson, even Will Smith, and record-breaking tournaments and whatever from all 3 of them.
It was never as close as it was last July when it was Michkov could push for number 1. It's never been that close again.
Yeah, I think it was closer until the World Juniors, and then Bedard went out and did that at the World Juniors, and then it wasn't close even before the World Juniors, but it was definitely closer than after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the gap was just, there's no chance. And then he comes back from that and puts up almost 3 points per game in the WHL, 70 goals, 140 points or something like that. It was and then 20 points in 7 games in the playoffs for Regina. Like nobody got close. But Fantilli doesn't have the greatest World Juniors. A reason behind that, again, his usage, third line. We see that a lot with prospects that go, was it Byfield, I think, who did the same thing, was a checking forward at the World Juniors, and Lafreniere wasn't. Lafreniere had the better tournament. Byfield got roasted and said, well, look what Lafreniere did. You didn't do that. Used in different roles. We see that a lot.
Wasn't Byfield like 4 days away from being in the next year's draft?
Yeah. But again, it's the
Byfield
usage, right? And from the surface level, a lot of people just look at the points and they don't see where guys are used. And Fantilli kind of fell victim to that. Still had a great World Juniors, and showed the other side to his game. Max Jones is another guy I remember already drafted by the Ducks at this point when he was at the World Juniors, but used as a checking role, and people criticized him. Ducks fans criticized him for his lack of production at the tournament. Again, we see things haven't panned out necessarily great for him at this point, but usage has something to do with it for sure, with their different levels of production. Either way, Fantilli comes out, finishes the year unbelievably, almost 2 points per game for Michigan, wins the Hobey Baker, becomes the third freshman to do so behind Correa and Eichel. Second best points per game since Paul Correa. So in the last 2 decades, as a freshman in the NCAA, so he's kind of solidifies himself as the number 2, and that's at that time, right when he was winning the Hobey Baker. No question, he's a number 2. Leo Carlsson finishes his season at around the same time. Excellent SHL season. Has great playoffs in the SHL as well. Historic, like we said, the Sedins were the only ones better. But even then, he's still the number 3. You can find maybe 1 or 2 outlets who would say that he'd be a number 2. But it was Bedard, Fantilli, Carlsson. That was it. Will Smith not really in the conversation at all at that point. Michkov would be, but we know the whole situation with, again, his contract with St. Petersburg and the whole situation with Russia and Ukraine, and that issue not only with Russia playing in international tournaments, but with the whole ordeal with Russian players being able to come over and what's that going to look like. So he's not in the conversation all really at that point. Okay, that's done. Adam Fantilli's season is done. Leo Carlsson's seasons are done until the World Championships at this point. The under-18s come along. Will Smith stars and has an amazing tournament. 9 goals, 20 points in 7 games at the under-18s. Unbelievable. Leads the U.S. in that tournament. He had a great season too. Over 100 points in 60-plus games for the U.S. NTDP. So he did have a great season and was sitting in that conversation, again, for 4, 5, 6 at that point. Has this historic tournament, and then all of a sudden, the conversation comes out because the rest of these guys aren't playing. Bedard's done, Fantilli's done, Carlsson's done. He jumps into that conversation. Well, what if? Could somebody want to take him at 3? Is it possible that Columbus is going to want to take him at 3 and go for the dynamic, flashy, skillful player that Carlsson does possess that to some extent, but Will Smith is all that, right? Where Carlsson has other attributes to his game, his size, his physicality, his defensive prowess. Will Smith doesn't have that, but he's got more pure offensive upside. So maybe to go with guys like Kent Johnson and Patrick Laine, Columbus should go with that. Slow season at that time. Again, his play in the tournament warrants it, but recency bias, timing, trying to push stories out, that gets him in the conversation all of a sudden for number 3. To some extent as well, Zach Benson has a great playoffs for Winnipeg. He starts getting in the conversation. Could he go 4? Could he go, in 4 or 5 range? Doesn't get into the top 3, but again, it's the same premise, right? Where a guy that was still sitting around maybe the 6, 7 range, all of a sudden he jumps up because he's starting to get talked about because he's one of the only few guys playing in that range at this point. He's having a great playoffs. He gets bumped up into that conversation. World Championships come around. Fantilli and Carlsson are playing. Carlsson has a slightly better statistical World Championship than Fantilli does. All of a sudden, the conversation becomes, well, because he played better and his numbers look better, can he be the number 2? And now all of a sudden, there's now more of a conversation, despite it just being 8 and 10 games at the World Championships, that Carlsson has now made up a major gap on Fantilli that people are saying is closer to 50-50 than it was before the tournament. To me, that's the problem. That makes no sense. Because if you go back, and if we can rewind the clock and go look at all the talk before this, there's a very few category of people that would say that Carlsson had a shot at number 2. Before the World Championships, regardless of the Will Smith stuff, that doesn't even factor into this at this point. Almost everybody said Fantilli's the number 2. The Ducks basically won the draft lottery, to get him. Before anybody gets in the comments, I know they won the second overall draft lottery, but the
Yeah,
going.
can we not do that?
Let's
Can
not
we
do
not?
that.
We
Please.
do not need to be pedantic about that.
They,
There's you don't get anything from it. Yes, technically the Ducks won the second draft lottery for second pick.
Yeah.
Nobody feels that way about it.
Mm-hmm.
We can just all agree that when we say
lose.
the
Yeah.
lottery,
Yeah.
the lottery,
you lost, but you didn't lose, is what we're trying to say. Because you're getting Adam Fantilli. Nobody said you lost, but you didn't lose because you're getting Leo Carlsson. Everybody said, nope, you're getting Adam Fantilli. It's a win. You know, chalk it up as a win. Yeah, you didn't get Bedard, but you're getting the next best thing. It's Adam Fantilli. I could maybe name a handful of people who I saw at that point were saying they liked Carlsson better at number 2. And then we go to now after the World Championships, and all of a sudden, again, you got to write about something at this time of the year. You got to talk about something. You got to create some sort of conversation and debate to keep keep things going, keep things lively. Leo Carlsson is apparently in the mix now for number 2 a lot more than he was before the World Championships, because he posted 5 points in 8 games to Fantilli's 3 points in 10 games, playing about 3 minutes more a night in a first-line role versus Fantilli starting as a 13th forward. I don't see where the gap is there. Like, where's the gap made up? How was his tournament significantly that much better, watching both of them, that he's now gained significant ground on Fantilli, that there's that much more of a conversation about him being there at number 2. And I think that's where we get into that. What you were talking about is if they believe Carlsson's good enough to go number 2 and that Smith could go number 3 over Leo Carlsson, where do we stop? Like, how is Smith not then better than
and this
Fantilli?
Isn't some stupid slippery slide bullshit. This isn't a slippery slope thing. It really is. It's just like, how do we try to stack these things logically to make sense of the whole thing? Because that's part of what we're asking ourselves to do, is to create a picture and see the way that it's going to play out. And that's why, again, guys like Cam Robinson, who we talk about on here all the time, how much we respect him. He was pumping Carlsson's brakes in that top 3, even pushing for top 2 early in November. I have no beef with the Carlsson should get a serious look at number 2 thing. I think the thing that has been frustrating, or not frustrating, but I don't want to say frustrating because that's not the right word. The thing that hasn't necessarily made sense to me is at times at the insistence that it's more of a 2-man race than it feels like. Mm-hmm. And again, to me, it always comes back to, if it's a 2-man race, it's a 3-man race. Because if it's not a 3-man race, it's not a 2-man race. And what we're saying is that we have a 1, a 2, and then we have 3 guys who could go in any order from 3 through 5, and every single order is valid and makes sense, and it's depending on what the team is looking for, how the team, the kind of vibes you get off the players, different things like that. That's perfectly reasonable, but I do think it's more than fair to say at this point, Adam Fantilli should be considered, and seems to be, to a large degree, though not unanimous, and nothing's unanimous, but again, whatever. We're critiquing the conversation in a sense, which is stupid, I guess. But it just seems he seems to be the most likely candidate to go number 2, unless Chicago does something really, really, really fucking stupid, in which case everything goes to hell.
Yeah. Yeah, listen, this is the thing for me, is when I'm looking at Fantilli versus Carlsson and just comparing them personally on attributes. Fantilli's a better skater. He has a higher hockey IQ. He's a better playmaker. He has a better game-breaking ability to, break open. We look at the game-winning goal we saw for Canada in the semifinals. Like, he just has that ability to do that. He has a better shot, in my opinion. And that's, again, not to say that Carlsson isn't really close to him in those in those attributes, in those skill sets. Fantilli just is better in pretty much all is, maybe except the defensive side of his game. And it's not that he's bad in his own end. It's just the ability to kind of read the play. It's just not there yet because he's so focused, his tunnel vision kind of on get the puck on my stick and I'm going to get up the ice and I'm going to do it myself. A lot of that comes with being the main focal point for Michigan and the main guy, and you're asked to do that on a nightly basis. So it's hard to kind of discredit a guy for having that tunnel vision when everything goes through you. But he's just, in my opinion, in all of those categories, is better than Leo Carlsson and has a higher ceiling than Leo Carlsson. So for me, there's no debate when we say
Right.
can Leo Carlsson go number 2? Like, it just seems ridiculous for me. When you get now into the debate after that, I think like the tiers are Bedard, Fantilli. I'll put Will Smith in that tier with Leo Carlsson because I think the debate to say, should Columbus take him at number 3 because he has this dynamic, flair. He's like, again, not to compare him to Zegras, but that skill and that flashiness to him, he has that. Where Leo Carlsson maybe doesn't have that as much. He's just more well-rounded. So what do you want? Do you want the more well-rounded prospect who kind of doesn't have as many weaknesses? Or do you want the all-offense guy who, if things pan out for him at the NHL level, could be up there with Bedard and Fantilli as the top point producers at the next level if things go well? There's a bit more risk with that. That debate I can get behind because I can say these are two different types of players. One is more dynamic offensively, the other one's a little bit more well-rounded. So pick your choose your poison at that point. Which do you like more? Which do you like more in your system? Which more do you have more faith in? That's fine. I can get behind that debate. But when you look at Fantilli with Carlsson, you say, well, this guy is better than the other guy in almost everything here, and there's really no difference. That's where I can't make that debate. Is Fantilli is clearly the better player than Leo Carlsson. And Leo Carlsson's a great player, but I can't get behind that.
And I'll say this right now. The one thing that anybody in a hockey ops position who knows, has the access and stuff like that, anybody who I didn't think was full of shit or have any reason to think was full of shit who walked up to me and just said non-hockey, intangible wise, we think Carlsson is better than Fantilli. Yo, I'm that dude. You take him second. If you really think that, the intangible, but short of there just being a gaping character flaw, I can't understand the argument. Now, here's real quick. I want to step just outside of this conversation because you said a name, and for some reason, when you said it, it made me think of something, and I hadn't put this all together yet. And again, take this completely out of the conversation. If you're Columbus, would you at all be concerned that your two best offensive creative players can't skate?
Are we talking
if you take Smith? No. I'm talking Kent Johnson.
Okay. Yeah.
If Kent Johnson and Will Smith are you might have one of the best power plays in the league because from a standstill, you've got two incredible creative players. But are you a little bit worried about their ability to get up and down the ice at 5-on-5? Or with KJ probably being a wing long term, maybe that's less of an issue. You just don't play them together.
I think it's a concern for sure. It's not that you're choosing between a clearly dynamic skater like a Bedard or Fantilli, where Carlsson is a better skater, but he's not significantly above NHL average in terms of his skating. I'd put him and Smith almost in the same category where Smith maybe the top speed is maybe a little bit better than Leo Carlsson, but it's not as smooth. His skating isn't dynamic. It's not the smoothest skating stride, so you wonder how that's going to transition at the next level. And then with Carlsson, he is a smooth skater and he's got a structured stride, but the top speed isn't there. So I think you have your concerns with both. But yeah, I think there is some concern there with if you're taking Smith is if you're going to play him with Johnson, then they're both not exceptional skaters, and even Laine's not the greatest skater either, right?
No, he's not a good skater.
So you've got your only exceptional skater then is Johnny Gaudreau on that team, which isn't the worst thing. But I think you can get around that, right? You play Smith?
Yeah, that's
you
true.
Play Smith with Gaudreau, or you play Johnson with Laine. There's ways you can get around that, and they have.
Is it Sillinger or Perfetti? Which one is where?
Sillinger. It's Sillinger. Yeah.
Perfetti's the kid in Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
One of these days, I'll remember which Cole is where. The only Cole I know is the one in Montreal.
You knew where they both were, so you got it. But yeah, I think at this point, for me, the skating is close enough between the two of them that the real debate is just what type of player do you want and do you think fits your roster currently? Do you want maybe the safer pick in Leo Carlsson in that he is more well-rounded and maybe the offensive ceiling isn't as high as Will Smith, but you know he's going to be like a number 2 center, and as if things go great, he's going to be, you know, an elite number 1 center, with maybe the risk that he could shift to the wing and you don't have your center. And then with Will Smith, you've just got that offensive ceiling that he could potentially be, you know, one of the best producers in this draft, right up there with Bedard and Fantilli, right? So that's what I think, for me, what you're making the decision between. And I personally think Carlsson is probably the better fit, because I think they do, like, when you look at Laine, Goodrow, and Johnson, Smith stylistically fits with them. He's a little bit maybe too similar to them, where with Carlsson you're getting a bit of a different profile, something they don't have. And if he ends up playing a you know, center for that team, something they desperately need, right, is just an elite 2-way number 1 center who still has the playmaking ability, the skill to fit in with, you know, a Johnson or a Laine or a Goodrow, right? He's not a passenger on the line. He's not just a, you know, the 2-way big guy, but there's no offensive skill there. He's not that type of guy, right? So personally, I don't see them passing up on Leo Carlsson. And again, I think there's a lot to be said about how exceptional his draft eligible season was, and that you really can't pass on him at number 3.
He's a really good player. He's going to be incredibly special. Let me say, sorry, not he's going to be incredibly special. He is an incredibly special prospect. And that is the part of this that I always kind of hate, is I feel like I'm just shitting on 19-year-olds and 18, 17-year-olds, and it's not fun. I'm not trying to do that. It's more of just trying to engage with the way that we have these conversations and things like that. Would you trade down from 3 for 6 and 12?
I don't think so.
Because here's the thing for me. You know who's going to be there at 6 and could possibly even be there at 12 that I think makes more sense if you don't want Carlsson? Oliver Moore.
Yeah, he could be.
He's such a good skater, and his motor is so high. Putting him in the middle of a team that has wingers like Laine and KJ and Goodrow.
If anybody was going to pull off a ballsy move like that, it'd be Jarmo, right? Like, it really would, to say, listen, I think the gap between those guys at 6 and 12 to Carlsson and Smith isn't as big as some people think it is. So if Arizona thinks, you know, that Carlsson and Smith are well above the rest of them, and they want to move in 3 and take Leo Carlsson at 3 and have their kind of cornerstone piece to go with Logan Cooley and generate some excitement there, that they might do that. I could see that possibly working there. Personally, I wouldn't trade 3 for 6 and 12, because I do think it is Bedard, Fantilli, Leo Carlsson, and then Smith has kind of worked his way into that conversation, but it is those 4. And Michkov would be in there if, you know, without the issues we've already talked about. So there, for me, on a skill level, without any of the outside factors, there's a 5, and then it drops off for me. Like, there's a top 5, and then it kind of goes down from there. And the tiers are, you know, Bedard, Fantilli, and then Carlsson, Smith. And I'd still throw Michkov into that tier with Carlsson and Smith, despite the risks, and say that they're all kind of in there at that 3rd tier. And then from there, you've got your Bensons, your Moores, your Reinbackers, you know, those types of guys, where I think from 6 to 12, 6 to 13, they're all fairly close. So again, it just depends on how comfortable you are and how good or how much better you think Carlsson and Smith are than those guys at 6 to 12, if you're comfortable doing that and moving down, or how much you value getting 2 of those guys between 6 and 12 versus getting 1 of those guys higher up, right? So it all depends, but it's definitely a possible thing I could see happen. I could see both of those teams being interested in pulling off a move like that, depending on how they see this draft shaping out.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to tweet a poll. I'm afraid of making that doesn't look right at all. What's the shorthand for decisions?
I don't know. DEC dot?
No, fucking no. It doesn't matter.
That sounds like it's something else.
I'm afraid of.
I'm afraid of what it could actually mean. Listen, the only other thing I want to get into on this, because I feel like we've talked Fantilli, Carlsson, Smith, a little bit more about Michkov. because we haven't really gotten into it too much other than saying, like, we think he's a top 3 talent in this draft, but all the issues are there with, again, his contract and the whole Russian player situation. But, like, do you think anybody would take him?
Stop right.
Yeah, go.
Oh, no, say it.
I was saying, do you think anybody would take the risk on him at 3 or 4 over Carlsson or Smith? I'm not going to put him in the 1-2 conversation because I think, again, we've talked endlessly about how good Bedard and Fantilli are, that there's no way the risks you would take on Michkov at one of those 2 positions for him. But I think there's some validity to say, could he go at 3 or 4 over Carlsson or Smith? Because I think he's a better player. Like, his ceiling is...
He is a better player.
Yeah, his ceiling is higher. He has the potential still to be the best player from this draft just based on his skill level. So do you take the risk at 3 or 4? What is Columbus and San Jose, right, at 3 and 4?
I think that there are teams who could trade up for number 3, and it would make a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Again, to me, if I'm Arizona, I'm calling.
You don't risk that he falls to 6? Because I think if he makes it, if he doesn't get taken by San Jose at 4, Montreal doesn't take him.
The other one. No, here are the other 2 then, I guess, off the top of my head. The other 2 off the top of my head would be, does Washington trade up from 8? But what do you pay, right? You don't have a ton. And then, like, if you're Carolina, do you try to trade up from 22?
Yeah, but what do you have?
I don't know what you even have.
Yeah. It's like, where do you trade up to, right?
I mean, honestly, I think at that point you actually don't trade to 3. I think you trade for 4. I think Mike Greer is so underwater in terms of needing picks and prospects. He's the guy you could get.
Yeah.
San Jose has 2 picks this year? 2 first-round picks this year? They've got 4. And crap, 1 second. Sorry, I have it.
I'm not sure if they have
here.
If they have 2.
Let's see. San Jose Sharks. This is riveting television. 4 and 26.
Okay.
So they have 4, 26, and 36. Ooh, yeah. I mean,
it's possible, but
they need picks in that range. Like they need guys.
They also just need anything. Their prospect pool beyond William Eklund is very, very thin. It's why I think that at 4 there's a really high chance if they like Michkov, they'll take him. And
I mean, look, if I would take him at 4, no questions asked, especially for the Sharks. I think the Sharks and Arizona are the 2 of the only places that I guess, again, unless you want to say Washington because maybe the OV thing allows him to get out of his contract early, maybe he can come over, whatever, right? But just in the terms of being able to wait as long as it's going to take and not have to pay a price with your fans, it's San Jose and it's Arizona.
Yeah.
Who, might not be Arizona much longer.
This is how I see it going in terms with Michkov. If Columbus takes Will Smith at 3, I think San Jose takes Leo Carlsson.
Absolutely, because then they can play him and William Eklund, and they at least can ride out those 2 guys for a couple of years, buy some goodwill, watch them stunt.
I think Montreal.
I think that's a great pair.
I think Montreal at that point either tries to trade down,
like take fucking
or
they
take a center. I think they take like Moore or something like that. And then he potentially goes. Then I think Michkov might go to Arizona at 6. If Smith goes at 3. If Carlsson goes at 3, I think San Jose takes Michkov at 4, and then Montreal takes Will Smith at 5, and then it goes down there. I think that's probably the ideal situation for all teams, right? Is it goes Bedard at 1, Fantilli at 2, Carlsson at 3, Michkov at 4, Smith at 5, and I think everybody walks away happy at that point, right? Everybody kind of gets positionally what they need. Columbus gets their hopeful center, Montreal gets their hopeful center, San Jose gets the potential best prospect from this draft if all the risks kind of go their way and he pans out. They get the high, a very high upside pick that they have the time to wait for, right? Like they're just starting their rebuild. I don't want to see him go there. I don't want to see them get Michkov, but I think that's where kind of everybody walks away happy at that point, right? And for me, that's how it should go. Is then you've got the top 5 players, and the 5 that I have kind of with that separation go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, Michkov would likely go higher. It's just the risks that come along with drafting him at this point, and how long you have to wait for him. But it does work out really well for all teams there. Chicago gets the best player in the draft. The Ducks get the second best player in this draft and a future franchise number 1 center. Columbus gets their hopeful number 1 center for the future.
I really wanted us to win. I really wanted it to be us in Columbus 1-2.
Yeah, I know.
I really wanted Fantilli to go to Columbus. He would have been so great for them. Mm-hmm. And plus, I would have loved having to watch some of my OSU fans, my OSU fan friends, have to root from a player from Michigan, which is a thing they're becoming increasingly accustomed to with KJ. And I think Werenski played for Michigan too.
Yeah, he did.
Oh, beautiful. Love it.
Did Johnny Hockey play for Michigan too? No, he didn't. Did he?
No, he played for Boston College, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that would have been.
Anyways,
ideal.
it's fine. We need to talk about Oliver Moore being the best American center on this list instead of Will Smith, but whatever.
Yeah, that will be for our draft show coming up.
I love Oliver Moore, man. His game is so good. That fucker.
So we're gonna have
if he ends up in Philly the way that Tankathon's mock has it, Cutter Gauthier and him as your 1-2 centers in the future, that's nice.
Cutter Gauthier,
I still think you're probably
World Championship too.
Plus, he's got a great fucking name. And, if there was going to be a team that had a guy named Cutter on it, it should be the Flyers.
Yeah, it should. I remember when he got picked there, I was like, this is a Flyers pick. Like, it just makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it feels like the same way with Detroit picking up Casper. Yeah. It's like, yeah, of course you did. Of course that's who you took. Yeah. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, no.
Bastards.
Exactly. Anything else, I guess, on the draft? We've gone through the first hour. Quick thing. There's absolutely no way we're getting to the prospect season review today. I think
not even a chance.
So that will be on another episode. But anything more on the lottery and the first kind of 5 picks here? I think we've covered it pretty well.
No, I do. I think it's going to be fun. I think this is going to be a really fascinating draft. I think we're seeing the way teams think about drafts and stuff like that start to change and how they value prospects and stuff like that. And I think this draft provides a lot of really interesting inflection points, right? And it's going to be interesting to see how those kind of play out. Like, where does Zach Benson go? Who takes that risk? Who takes Michkov? What happens at 3? What happens at 2? Because technically that's a thing. You know what I mean? Who trades up? Who moves back? I just think this is such a strong first round as far as just quality of, I don't know, you'd say what, B to A minus mid first round picks that I think, we're going to see a lot of teams kind of show their hands a little bit with what they're thinking.
Yeah.
And it's going to be fun.
Last thing on this then, who... three questions, but they're all related. So I'll ask the questions. You can answer them all together. Who do you want at 2? Who do you think goes at 2? And how confident are you percentage-wise that outcome of who you think goes there happens?
I would say it's Fantilli, and 85%.
Okay. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah.
I'm never willing around any draft to ever say I'm 100% confident. But I think it just feels very simple to me. Mm-hmm. And there's something to be said for when things feel simple. That's kind of a red flag, but I think sometimes when things feel simple, they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say Fantilli about 90%. If you had asked me before all this stuff, I'm getting played by the stories as well. I would have been 99% after the draft lottery. And it's not that I like Carlsson more now. It's just with all the reports coming out and experts and NHL scouts saying, well, it's not guaranteed. And the reason that makes you worry is, again, they're not saying that because they're hearing what the Ducks want to do. They're just hearing other scouts say on their board, they like Carlsson more than Fantilli. And what we know in a lot of those cases is some of these teams outside the top two won't even have Bedard or Fantilli on their board because they think they're going to be gone
all the time.
Right, and
they lie.
You know, a team
They're
will put
lying liars.
A team will put Carlsson ahead of Fantilli because they think there's a better shot they're going to get him, and they've watched him a lot more, and they like him more because they watch him a lot more. So, yeah, it's hard not to get wrapped up in a lot of this, but when you're sitting there at number 2 and you hear experts and you know, people working around the NHL say that they like Carlsson better than Fantilli for whatever reason, it starts to play in your head, and you worry that, or I do, that come draft day, you know, Martin Madden and Pat Verbeek are going to get up there and say, with number 2 pick, we select Leo Carlsson, and it gets you a little worried. But not that, you know, again, we've talked about it endlessly. He's going to be a great player, but I feel the gap there is too significant. Like you said, it feels like an easy decision. Make the easy pick. Take the guy who's, at this point, better and projects to be better, and personally fits this team and the way they're built right now and the prospects they have better. The forward group and everybody and all the pieces they have in place, McTavish and Zegras, right? So Troy Terry. So, yeah, make the easy pick. Take Adam Fantilli and save us all some grief.
Here's my question real quick. Just off the top of your head, you don't need to give it any super, super serious thought. What would Montreal have to offer for you to trade them the 2 pick? Is it 5 and Cole?
I guess. And even then, I don't know. I like Cole Caulfield a lot, and then you're thinking at that point, I guess, you know, either you're getting Cole and Michkov or Cole and Smith. That's likely one, you know, what you're taking there at that point. But I don't even.
The German Eddy.
Oh, Ryan.
He takes the German.
Ryan Backer, and
you get a right D. And then you get your top goal scorer. Ooh, baby!
I just think it's
a pipe dream. It's a stupid idea.
Yeah,
never do it, but
I just think even at that point, I just don't think you can, because there's the one thing this team needs, and we've talked about it before. They've got all the small pieces in there. The Ducks need a number 1 elite center prospect in their system.
Yeah.
And you can't pass that up, man. You just can't. You were hoping to get that with Bedard, and you get lucky that you still have the ability to draft a guy that has that potential at number 2. You got to take it. There's not many trades I think that could get put on the table that would convince me to trade it. And I know you you sent me somebody's idea, Columbus trade.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody who writes for the Can, and they were going to put out an article about, you know, Columbus is looking at trading up for 1 or 2 and what it would kind of take, and they lost interest when we were having a conversation about 2. They're like, I think Carlson's like, again, it's all the noise you hear. It's like, Carlson's good enough. I don't know if it's worth to move up and take the cost that it's going to blah, blah, blah.
What was it? It was like 3 Jiricek and another pick, right? Another first or something like that?
Yeah, it was like 322 in Jiricek for 2 and Callie Klang.
Yeah.
I think is kind of where we ended up around.
And that's where you maybe convince yourself that, and it's only because you're moving from Fantilli to Carlsson. Like we said, like, you know, Carlson's still an exceptional player, so you're getting Carlsson and Jiricek,
right.
Jiricek might be the best defensive prospect in the entire league at this point, and then you get another first round pick in a deep draft as well. So that's what it would take to consider it, and really the only reason you're considering it at that point is because you're moving down 1 spot. And that would only be in the fact that Columbus thinks Adam Fantilli is exceptionally better than Leo Carlsson, that they'd be willing to give up Jiricek and another first-round pick to do so, which I don't think them or any team believes there's that much of a gap between the two.
Yeah, and I think, again, just talking through it, I do think you could talk me into it in Columbus from saying, you know what Columbus has never fucking had? A legitimate first-line center.
Yep.
And we want one. And we want one now, and we want to bring him in while we still got Johnny Hockey, while we still got, you know, these young guys in this team, like, especially after having to trade Bjorkstrand last summer. It would be nice to, like, have a real kick in the ass of positivity for that team and being like, we have a number 1 center.
Yeah.
I get that. I totally get that.
I feel like if Leo Carlsson wasn't there, and just took him out of the equation. And it was Will Smith was the next. I think you make.
Yeah.
I think you could maybe convince yourself that giving up all of that is worth it because of how much better Fantilli is than Will Smith. The gap is significant there, but because Leo Carlsson's kind of like smack dab right in the middle of that, it's like, okay, well, he's still good enough and he still has the potential to be a number one center. There is some risk there, but to give up that much to move up that one spot and take, Fantilli, you say, it's maybe not worth it at that point because the gap isn't as big, and that's why I see why they kind of backed down from it a little bit and said, you know what, no, let's not do that.
Yeah, it's fun, man. It's gonna be a fun draft. We're all gonna have panic attacks. I think the draft is on my mom's birthday, so I'm excited to not pay attention to my mom.
Buy her a Fantilli jersey.
Yeah, oh my God.
Ducks Fantilli
Just
jersey.
because my dad's a Kings fan, that would be twice as funny.
All right.
That would be so good.
We're done draft lottery review, and it only took us an hour to do it. So we're
so far ahead of schedule.
The Ducks coaching search update. This one actually should be relatively short because I know we covered this pretty heavily in another episode where we talked about all the different candidates who they could get, and you hated that episode because came out right after that most of the guys I had listed down were in the conversation. This was amazing to me though. I don't think I've ever seen it come out how many guys a GM has talked.
It's a joke, Eddie. It was a joke.
No way, it was a joke. Was it? Okay, thank God.
Yeah,
thank God. It had to be. No, I like it. It felt like it was a joke, but then like it literally never got covered and put out there that it was a joke. So I was like, this is like, there's absolutely no way he's talked to this many people.
Yes, Pat Verbeek has talked to 500 hockey.
Yeah, it seemed ridiculous, and but like the guy who tweeted it out, legitimately, never seen him joke about anything in my life.
No, Sarah Voley is one of the least funny people in the entire world, and I get that. If I looked like I was 75 at 28, I would feel bad about it too.
He tweets like, Bob McKenzie before Bob McKenzie retired, where you have to like, you measure your tweets out and you can't get anything wrong because, you're like the number one source. So yeah, he put it out, structured tweet. He's like, Pat Verbeek has spoken to roughly 468 potential candidates, and these are the top 3 names confirmed on the list: Andrew Carberry, Andrew Burnett, and Mike Vellucci. And then it started spiraling. Thank God it was a joke, because that was ridiculous. I was trying to all the jokes that came in after that of I talked to him yesterday. Like he gave me a call after work to just check in and see what I was doing. But from what we have heard outside of that is it still is an extensive list, an extensive search, and I think as of a couple days ago, he's had some more comments with the media that it could take until after the draft. It doesn't seem to be the priority in a sense right now. We know he was over in Latvia for the World Championships to watch Fantilli, to watch Carlsson, which honestly, for me, should be the priority at this point. We might as well wait until the season is over and all candidates are there available for you to talk to, and all you kind of do your due diligence, go through all the interviews that you want to go through, and then make a concrete confirmed decision after the draft and after those stressors are over of picking at number 2 and you've got your guy.
Here's a fun question.
Yeah.
About this thing. One of the things that kind of came out that I saw was Verbeek saying he wanted to bring. Wait, let me say it this way. I don't remember how it was reported, but it was said Verbeek was looking too. So I don't know if it's something Verbeek said or if someone said, I heard this is what Verbeek, blah, blah, blah. But essentially, he wanted to bring someone in who was going to hold the players accountable and demand a more competitive team next year. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you?
Well, what it meant to other people was Mike Babcock and Dale Sutter.
Okay, I'm not doing this right now. No. We're not playing this game. What I'm asking you is, what does he mean by more competitive? What does that mean? Because being more competitive than what they were last year is such a low bar. They could lay down and roll over it.
Mm-hmm. I honestly think it's a media trained answer almost more than anything.
See, that's what I feel like it is too, and it kind of bugs me.
I don't think it reveals
it doesn't
anything.
feel helpful.
Yeah, it doesn't reveal anything. But it's on par with a lot of what we've heard in any time Pat Verbeek is explained anything, which is fine. I'm fine with that. He doesn't need to reveal anything. But we talked about his comments on why he thought it was time to move on from Dallas Eakins, and it was like the same point three times. He just felt like it was time to move on from him. Like that's exactly what that is. It doesn't, and I know a lot of people took it and said, well, it means he's looking for an experienced NHL coach, a guy who has a history of winning. It doesn't necessarily mean that at all, and that's not exactly what he said either. And like to your point, there really is there's a lot of room to improve on this year. Like anybody can come in and do that. So I don't think necessarily that meant anything, and I think with the hire in San Diego, it proves that like they aren't, it is again different, but they aren't looking at something specifically, and they are open to different options. So I don't think it means that a Bruce Boudreau or Alain Vigneault or somebody like that is more likely to get hired because of those comments than an Andrew Burnett or an Andrew Carberry or Mike Vellucci, or a guy who doesn't have NHL head coaching experience or a lot of head coaching experience in general at any level. I think they're considering all different options. I think they've probably interviewed a lot of veteran NHL head coaches. I'm sure they've interviewed a lot of guys like Brunette who are NHL assistant coaches or have been head coaches in the past. And I'm sure they've interviewed a lot of guys like Carberry and Vellucci who have been at the AHL level and either been head coaches and moved into assistant coaching jobs and had success with top teams in the NHL. So I think they're considering all options. I think that's why this is going to take them so long. And honestly, I'm glad it's taking them this long, and they are willing to drag this process out. There is no rush. There is no, in my opinion, as much as I like Andrew Burnett, a clear front runner in this situation. That means you have to wrap this up quickly to get this guy. I think they're trying to find the right fit for this organization to take it forward, and that should take time. And that should be something you say, listen, we have this very important draft that's going to define the future of our franchise, and it might seem like a simple decision, but we want to just get this over with. And the draft is not just the number 2 pick, it's the rest of the picks the Ducks have too. They've got a lot of second-round picks that they want to hit on as well.
7 picks in the first 90.
Yeah, so you know what? Let's focus on that as the playoffs end and teams get eliminated, and Stanley Cup is handed out. More candidates will come into the mix that I'm sure they'll want to interview, and you get to make your full decision, maybe narrow it down. Maybe going into the draft they've narrowed it down to 3 or 5 guys, and they come out of that and have a second round or a third round or whatever round it is of interviews with these guys and make their final decision based off that. I'm completely fine with that process. Him saying that it might take that long does not mean they are not narrowing down their search. I guarantee you they have had guys that they've talked to and immediately said, no, we're not going with that guy. And I'm sure it's an ever-evolving process of they're crossing guys off the list and working this list down to an inevitable one guy that they say they want this guy. And I'm fine with that taking as long as it takes to get to that point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think there's any rush. And I think... Yeah, I feel like a little bit of a sucker just because I was very excited. And I'm still excited. I don't want it to stay that way with Pat Verbeek. But, like, his first few kind of press availabilities felt a lot more transparent.
Yeah.
And it feels as he's gotten a little bit more comfortable. And, like, it's understandable. He's not going to show his hand. This is the start of, what hopefully he's hoping is a job he's going to have for a long time. I have no issue with any of that. So it's just one of those things where I do feel like a little bit of a sucker because I was very excited about how transparent he seemed to be, and he's really kind of circled the wagons. And
yeah, I think that will come back.
And it's fine. It's like
when it's
said,
appropriate. I think it will come back, right? Like the 2 things we've seen him dance around lately is there's not much more you can say without it being inappropriate about the Dallas Eakins situation. I think you can't be any more transparent than basically saying, he didn't do a good job and we didn't want to bring him back because of that. he just said like it was time for a new direction, which is also true. Like it just is, and we all kind of knew it was time for a new direction. He's just being respectful to a guy who has served this franchise well and been a respectful person.
No, he handled it.
Yeah.
He handled it great. He treated him with respect and class, and that's all I ask. Like I know, especially in hockey, the classy thing is still fucking thrown around. Like everybody's losing their mind about stuff, but like there is something to just treating people with a sense of like respect that as an institution you should strive for, especially this kind of thing where sports is something that largely trades in relationships. Asking people to come join your team, asking people to make trades with your team, all that kind of stuff. Like it's all fundamentally about, relationships. So I like the way that he's kind of handled it. But it's interesting to me, right? Because like he said that, and he's, again, said it better then, but it doesn't feel all that entirely dissimilar to what Pierre Dorian said a few years ago, where he said the rebuild is over. And everybody took that to mean, well, now they're contenders in their mind. Mm-hmm. And I still maintain that what he was trying to say is, I'm fucking done getting blown out 50 games a year.
Yeah.
I do not want to get blown out 50 games a year. I would like to win 30 games, and I would like to be in the wild card race. And they didn't quite get there. And, there's holes on the defense and all that stuff. Like, he might have been a little... But I don't think what he was saying is an unfair thing. And when it comes to Verbeek, my question is he looking to win 30 games, or is he winning to lose games by 1 goal instead of losing games by 2 and 3 goals? Like, if you told me his expectation was simply to drop from 4 goals a game to around 3 goals a game, and hope the offense moves up a little bit and you see some special teams improvement, and he says that's more competitive to me. I figure we'll end up between the 7 and 13, 7 and 14 range, realistically with the talent we have, what we're bringing in, yada, yada, yada. But we're still going to be a lottery team next year. That seems perfectly reasonable and fine to me. If he said, I am expecting this team to contend, like actually contend for a playoff spot, similar to what some people thought maybe last year could have been, that would be very disconcerting to me because there's nothing here to show that this team is ready for that.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, they're worse off because they're still farther away from having a real defense.
Yeah, I definitely don't think the expectation by him, even from with what he said and the way he's talked about the rebuild, is that they're going to be a playoff team next year. He's talked a lot about the influx of young players coming to San Diego and how Matt McIlvain, Jesus, I could not say that name, how he's going to have a big role in developing those young players, and he's done that throughout his career, and how he's going to kind of shape them and get them ready to step into the lineup, and that's going to take time, and he mentioned that. So I don't think there's any expectation that that's going to happen overnight and that they're going to be a playoff team for next season. But I do think, there is some expectation of improvement, however that comes. And I think it's good that he's not labeling it, because you can be too transparent and say, well, I'm expecting this, or I'm expecting to be a wild card team next year, and you put yourself in a tough position. I think he's just expecting improvement, whether that is, like you said, going from allowing 4 goals per game to 3 goals per game and having the offense increase, or having Adam Fantilli step in the lineup and seeing him play well, and McTavish take a step forward, and Drysdale come back and play well, and Zegras and Terry take steps forward, and the young players start developing. Maybe Michkov or Zellweger or those guys kind of make their way into the lineup. Does Pastujov play in the AHL? Does he get a sniff? Does Tracy and Perreault start to develop and get in more than one game at the NHL level? So I think he's doing a good thing there, being vague on terms of what he's expecting in terms of improvement, because you don't want to kind of shoehorn yourself and put yourself in these expectations and say, no, we're going to be a playoff team, or we're going to be fighting for the wild card, and then you fall short of that, or you fall significantly short of that, which still could be an improvement on, last season or this season, where you did better, but you set the bar so high that you fell short of that bar, even if it is an improvement from last season, that it looks like a disappointment, and it looks like a disappointing season because of that. So when you set the bar low and you don't kind of give these specific expectations for next season, just say you're hoping for an improvement on it, there really isn't And, it's really not difficult to make an improvement on this last season, or it shouldn't be, right? To take some steps forward there with a new direction, new head coach, and some good young players coming into the lineup.
No, yeah. And it's interesting, right? Like, I think the comments that you made right now about you don't want to be like too transparent or too, I guess, optimistic in a sense publicly.
Yeah.
Because then you set yourself up for like whatever amount of like ridicule and stuff like that. And like, I get that, right? Like, as an organization, it can be a little bit embarrassing for us to be like, we think we're here. And then you just very clearly are not. And then it's like, okay, well, so now what? And you're like, well, fuck, I don't know, man. I thought we were closer than we were.
Yeah.
Like, I get that that's not fun and it can be a little embarrassing. Again, as a professional organization, I do think there is something, though, on our parts where we should, for let me say it this way. It's good to strive. And I think that the thing I guess I wonder about is like, how do you find that space, right? Between fucking reckless optimism and naivete and striving and setting goals that are hard. Because setting hard goals is how these guys got here, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't make the NHL because you think it's easy. That, like, nobody does that. Like, even the most talented players in the world have to work incredibly fucking hard and all that stuff, right? So these aren't people who are, and again, it's something that we talk about all the time in the draft, right? You take these top players and they come into these situations, and now it's just supposed to be okay that they're losing games, and how do they react to that when they've been winners, which is why they were taken at the top of the draft and all this kind of stuff. And I think trying to find that space, and maybe, that'll be kind of like a personal thing for me this season, right? Is just trying to figure out how to find that space between like striving and delusion. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know where the space is, and I would imagine, as with almost everything, it's situational and contextual, and it depends on who's being asked to do what and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to be very curious to see how he approaches it, because I would like to be at 3.3 goals against a game and closer to 2.5 goals against 4, and we're getting more loser points. Like, that's great. That's exactly where this team should be looking. You know what I mean? You want to see more consistent. I don't know, like, what's between a flash and like a thing, right? Like, what is like the flat, like, what's more than a flash of like talent from some of these guys, right? Take these steps where they go on 4 or 5 game runs, like Terry's, was it 25 game run or whatever the fuck it was 2 years ago was very cool, but that's clearly special. Mm-hmm. You can appreciate how special that is in the moment. I think when you watch a player develop and they start to take over for 3-4 game stretches here and there, that's when you're like, oh, these guys are getting it. Now they're growing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and a lot of these expectations can be placed behind closed doors too. And like,
yes.
I think let's be honest here too. Like, even the worst of teams will be trying to say, like, we're competing to make the playoffs and win the Stanley Cup this year. And then it doesn't happen. But that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal for all these guys. Publicly, Pat Verbeek doesn't have to say anything other than he just wants to see improvement. Be as vague as possible to the media, because it doesn't really matter what you say. You don't want to be over, optimistic, like you say, and share with the media, say, no, we're going to be competitive. And listen, it's different if you're the Lightning or the Avalanche and you've made a long playoff run and you state publicly, we're going to win it next year. That's different. Right, because that's basically where you are, and you have the same team, and and if you fall short, guess what? If you didn't say anything, people would still be on you for falling short, because the expectations are already set just based on your performances, right? When you're on the opposite end of that, and you're one of the worst teams, the worst thing you can do is publicly state that your expectations are this high, and then you fall short. And like I said previously too, that falling short might still be an improvement on last year, but now it doesn't look like an improvement on last year because you've publicly said you're expecting this, and you've fallen way short of that. Whereas if you had have said nothing and just you're looking for some improvement, it looks like a lot better of a season if you don't have those high expectations, because you still improved on last year. Let's say, like you said, you shave down a goal and a half or a goal against per game. You add another goal for per game. You've got your young players like McTavish and Drysdale and Terry and Zegras and Fantilli all stepping up and producing well and having good seasons. Maybe Fantilli's in the Calder race. Zegras is pushing, 80 points next year, something like that, right? McTavish is around 50, 60, hopefully scoring 20 goals. If you see that progression, Drysdale comes back after injury, does well. Some of the other younger players are starting to kind of get 10 or 15 game stints at the NHL roster. That's all improvement at that point, and it's a lot easier to look at those as positives when you're not setting unrealistic expectations on how you expect the season to go. So yeah, ultimately, again, like I said, I think he's being very cautious about it right now. I think even honestly saying that it might take until late June or until after the draft is being transparent in the sense of how the process is going. He's not dancing around it. He's not saying, that he's being vague and saying, they're going to take their time or whatever. Like, he's strictly saying, like, no, we're going to wait on this. Like, we're not close to making the decision yet. We're doing our due diligence to make sure we get the right guy. And that's what they're doing. So in that sense, I do feel like it's transparent. And beyond that, what more can you say other than coming out and saying, well, these are our top 3 guys, and listing their names and saying this is who we're talking to, right? So he could have easily came out and said, we'll have a decision whenever we have a decision. But he came out and said, listen, it's going to take some time. We might not get anything done until after the draft, and that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah, and I think, I think sometimes when teams are at like 5 or 6 names very quickly, it really feels like they have like 1 or 2 people that they really wanted to talk to.
Yeah.
And then they just picked 4 names. And we're like, great, we have our group, let's meet with our people.
But they had like a mold of what they were looking for.
Yeah, and, it was like, let's get some people in the doors so people think we're serious. Pick some brains or whatever. Like
the Leafs in their current GM search right now.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think, like you were saying, Pat Verbeek doing it this way and just being like, we're being very methodical, we're being very diligent, we want to make sure we're looking everywhere that we can look, is very encouraging. And it absolutely could be they're just waiting on someone to become available to have interviews and stuff like that. And so they're delaying the first round of cuts or whatever, in so much as paring it down until they can talk to a few more people. But at the same time, I also don't, there's, like you said, there's no rush with picking the coach, because the most important pick is the number 2 pick, and we feel that that's fairly clear. And then all the picks after that, you aren't picking players for the coach. You're picking players for the system or the roster. You're picking players for the pipeline and stuff like that. And so, you're going to pick the 30 player or the 23 players over the 1 coach every time anyways. So there really isn't a rush to get all this stuff sewn up by the second day of the draft or anything like that. So there's a lot here that's very promising. I like some of the names. I'm not a huge fan of the Sheldon Keefe tree. I don't have really any reason to think.
I don't think he's getting far. Oh, you mean like guys underneath Sheldon Keefe?
Yeah, because what's his DJ Smith?
Yeah, DJ Smith was in the Marlies.
An assistant in Toronto for a while, right?
Yeah.
With Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not all that encouraging to me.
Yeah, and you fall in that trap sometimes with the assistant coaches of successful teams. How much are they contributing to that success? And sometimes it works out, and sometimes those guys go and they become successful NHL head coaches, and sometimes they don't. I mean, it's a risk you pay with anything, but yeah, I think you run a dangerous game when you say, okay, well, we're looking at these guys, again, Mike Vellucci, Andrew Carver, guys like that we're looking at them because their teams were successful and they were part of that coaching staff, that, okay, well, they must be good candidates, right? So it's tough.
And look,
it's tough to
and
just...
there's a lot of... Sorry, Tim.
No.
I was just gonna say, there's a lot of conversations that happen also that we don't have access to, which is a lot of teams could be like, for example, you could just be at a bar at a whatever the fuck, and someone's like, "Oh man, Mike Vellucci, ever since he took over the PK, they've been doing a much better job." We don't know that, right? Like maybe somebody writes about it, right? And so we get that kind of a thing, because those are usually stories that like beat writers and stuff tell. But it's easy to miss those stories. It's easy for those not to become stories over the course of a year. 3 or 4 other things at any given time could always be more interesting. So I think that you're right, that there is always an important level of skepticism. And, to argue with myself a little bit, I don't know that it's necessarily fair to be like, well, Sheldon Keefe kind of sucks and DJ Smith is kind of sketch, so maybe we don't hire any of those guys. It's like, okay, well, I don't know that we want to cut the whole barrel off at 2 guys, but, it is interesting to hear the names and to think of these associations we have with different teams and how they play and stuff. For as much crap as they get for being kind of loose, like we have seen, and other coaches have acknowledged this, we have seen Toronto tighten up defensively with the way that they play a full 200-foot game. So who was part of making that happen? Who was in part of implementing that? What, new roles and stuff like that? Maybe Carberry's, right? That's the guy in Toronto. Maybe he was a big part of them kind of getting buy-in or whatever. And again, we don't know these kinds of things. It's also, though, really hard to look at a team that has just underperformed in the playoffs. And, maybe it's as simple as they haven't had a goalie, so I'm not really mad at them. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but they had the goalies that they had for 82 fucking games. At a certain point, you got to figure out how to play with them.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting because it's a lot of guesswork from the outside. There's just so many conversations we don't know about.
Yeah, and ultimately, the good thing and why I'm happy that they're putting this time into it is because they're taking into consideration clearly all of those factors and trying to truly find the best fit, regardless of experience or whatever, right? Again, we've talked about teams that just we want a veteran guy, so nobody else gets considered. We look at one category here. These guys have previous NHL coaching experience and have coached this many games in the NHL, and they've been with this many teams and they've had this much success. And we've narrowed down our search now, and we've put the filters on, and we've only got 6 guys in this category. It doesn't seem, and I know, again, joking tweet from Frank Cervelli, but the number of names that they've looked
highlight
at
of the day for me, by the way,
it's
the
clear they're not putting the filters on the search. They're looking at all different guys, regardless of experience or whatever, to truly find who would be the best fit for this team based off whatever criteria they have for what that would be, whether it's history of working with a younger team and working with young players, or working in a similar market to Anaheim, or previous NHL experience, previous head coaching experience, or being able to take a team in the position that Anaheim is in now and grow them into a contender. Whatever that criteria is, they have that set behind closed doors, and they've opened that up to every available candidate, and are trying to find the best fit for what they're looking for. And that's truly what I'm happy with, is it doesn't seem like they've set those very small specific filters and looked at only a couple of guys. They've really opened up that search and are going to do their due diligence and find the best guy they think. And at that point, what it all falls on is, were they right? And, were the filters that they decided to go with for their head coaching search, were they the right ones? And are they going to find the right fit? And is their judgment the right call? And ultimately, that's what it should come down to, right? Because it's his decision. It's his choice. And, is he going to make the right choice? Well, we'll see. We'll find out, and we'll see how it goes. But I'd rather it be that way than limiting yourself to strictly trying to find the guy with the most experience, or the guy who, the youngest guy, the Dubas type situation, the youngest guy who's the smartest guy in the room, and you're limiting yourself to this type of profile of coach, right? So I'm glad they're not doing that. It's my long ramble.
Can't wait till the Ducks hire head coach Jonathan Chayka. Or what's his name? Jonathan?
John Chayka?
John Chayka, yeah.
Is it John Chayka? I feel like
Yeah,
I'm
John
just
Chayka.
saying it's John Chayka now because you said it's John Chayka. I think it's John Chayka.
No, it's John Chayka. That's
He's
fine.
going to be a head coach now?
Yeah, I mean, fuck it. Why not?
Why not?
Let's go for it.
They just fire Verbeek and then hire Chayka to do both.
Yes.
Or Chayka and Dubas.
There we go. Yeah.
They're both
Oh
behind
my
the bench
God.
and they're both
Okay, look,
in the box.
they can. I am perfectly fine with one of them being being in charge if they both fight to the death in a gladiator pit and the winner is in charge of the Ducks. I totally fine with that. Also because I know Pat Verbeek would get into the pit and kill them both before they had a chance. Then he would be like, "No, I'm still in charge."
Yeah, they wouldn't make it. I mean, honestly, that's really we stretched that out pretty farther than I thought we would. But that's really it for the updates. There's not major updates on the coaching search, other than really it's going to take a couple more months, or at least another month. So,
is there anybody's name that you haven't heard that you're interested in?
No, honestly, again we did our pretty heavy look into. I think it was around 15 guys. That had all been mentioned to be in the mix, whether it be for the Ducks coaching jobs or other coaching jobs. And there's nobody any names that I've seen or heard or thought of that haven't been mentioned or linked or been in the conversation. And for me, the front runner still is Andrew Burnett for who I would want to take over as Ducks head coach. But there's a lot of good options out there. There really are. And that's only going to continue to grow as more teams get eliminated and more options become available.
Well, there's only one more team left to get eliminated, Eddie.
Yeah, one more round.
So,
One more round, one more month. Draft will be over. Playoffs will be over. And there'll be no more excuses.
can we get Dallas to fire Peter DeBoer? Or am I afraid of that because then that means Peter DeBoer is out there, could be hired by anyone?
I don't
Peter
think
DeBoer.
yeah,
He's not a good coach.
I don't think they'd fire him. But I was gonna say if they did, I was sitting here wondering. I know you hate him, so I was wondering why you would even want that scenario to come anywhere close to being true.
Because he's not.
Do you want him in Anaheim just to prove that he's not a good coach?
No, because I don't like him, and I don't want to deal with his dork fucking. Did you see he got up there today with a bottle of hot sauce to eat the elephant? Oh man,
I'm not surprised.
I love metaphor, but good lord, dude, knock it off.
Do you think after this, Paul Maurice is a good head coach, regardless? Because I know all his talk before this, with how things went with Winnipeg, is that he wasn't. But now, I mean, the run that the Panthers have been on, that's going to be the conversation. Is Paul Maurice one of the best head coaches in the National Hockey League?
So I think, if I'm being honest, I think what this says to me, in concert with what I know of the Winnipeg stuff, is to me this kind of is like Paul Maurice is an average head coach. And with a good team and a good room, he got farther than he ever did with maybe a better team, certainly with better goaltending, and a really shitty room. Because everything we've heard for the last several years now has been about how everybody in Winnipeg hates each other.
Yeah.
Obviously, winning makes everything easy. But they did a fair number of winning in Winnipeg, and they still didn't like each other. They were not a bad team the entire time he was there. They were a competitive team for decent stretches. I think that this, to me, is Paul Maurice is about an average head coach, and in a good room, and this is the part of it that, like,
you got to give him credit for establishing a good room, though, or no?
So that kind of goes into what I was going to say, which is the part of this that we don't want to give credit for is how much of it is just entirely personality, which is just kind of chance. Like, we all know two people that we thought would get along hate each other, and we all know two people we thought would hate each other would get along, right? Like, these things just happen.
Yeah.
So you can't always predict, and so maybe he found the right room for his right message, and again, like, he's been pretty fucking humbled over the last 18 months. Like, he didn't have the easiest time, and he takes his job, and everybody's like, yo, what the fuck are they doing?
They didn't have a great season either.
No, I mean, again, Pittsburgh beats Columbus, and this entire thing is different because Florida doesn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just
Pittsburgh loses to Chicago and Columbus in their last 2 games, and Florida gets in.
Yeah. And but I just think, for me, that's kind of the way I guess that's just kind of the way that it kind of works. Is I think this shows that he's not as bad of a coach as I thought he was.
Yeah.
But fair. I also think it proves how much I do think we want coaching tactics to mean more than they do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying you don't need to be smart. I'm not saying you don't need to be able to make adjustments. But I think a lot more of the intelligence and adjustments that you're looking for are interpersonal. I think that's why, like, when Dallas Eakins handed the power play and the penalty kill over, it never bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up watching football. I'm used to coordinators and assistants. Like, the idea that you would have a guy who's in charge and then delegate to guys, like, this is basic, corporate structure. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't absurd to me. So it never bothered me that. Now, again, football's a little bit different. It's a giant roster. There's different units, and there's all these different things you have to work together. I understand that. But it doesn't feel unfair to me to be like, oh, man, this dude's really good at running a penalty kill. I'm going to let him run the penalty kill. That's why he's here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that makes you a bad coach.
No. I mean, every sport has coaching staffs, and just in some sports they're not as prevalent. But again, I think again on the coaching show we talked about, maybe it was when we were talking about McAvey, and I can't remember, but we talked about hockey's one of the hardest sports to, as a head coach, to tactically dominate another head coach and take over a game. You just don't notice as much, and it's harder to have you put your footprint on a game tactically and it to show up that you dominated them. And there are instances, and I know there were conversations about the Leafs with Sheldon Keefe and how a few games he just got completely outclassed and taken advantage of with some of his decision making and what he did. And there are more mistakes on his part than getting tactically outplayed by another coach. But it's just hard to see that. But then every sport has, like you said, football is maybe the more obvious with having offensive and defensive coordinators. But in hockey, when you don't hear about it unless you're looking for it, with the stories of seeing what assistant coaches do and being in control of the special teams or in coaching the forward group or the defensive group and having the structure set up that way, where the head coach is made more so just the head voice and kind of the collaborator of all of the coaching staff together. Soccer's another great example of where you don't really see too much what the rest of the coaching staff does. It's probably the main one in that sense, where the manager gets all the focus. But you've got again with we probably lose a bunch of people here though with Manchester United right now, where it's Erik ten Hag and everybody talks about him for good reason, but the rest of his coaching staff, Van der Gaag and the rest of the guys they have there, what they're in charge of tactically and what you don't hear anything about it, but how it plays a major role. And this is the guy who's tactically handling the structure of the players and how they line up and handling how they're going to line up against a certain opponent and whatever. Very similar to hockey in that sense, where the assistant coaches don't get the credit for what they do, and it all really falls on either the manager or the head coach.
Yeah, no, they never get credit until they're in an interview cycle, and then it's, that great power play from 3 years ago that such and such had, well, he was actually in charge of that, and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, oh, so now we give them the credit that they deserve.
Yeah, but then they go into a head coaching job, and they don't do well, and you say, oh, what was that? Well, it's completely different, right? Again, and it's the different what that job and what that position requires you to do.
Look, I would argue right now that two of the best 4 or 5 coaches, if not, in my opinion, 2 of the 3 best coaches in the entire league are vibes coaches. Mm-hmm. Rod Brindamore and John Cooper are vibes coaches. They're both incredibly smart. No one's going to accuse Rod Brindamore of not knowing the game. I think we've all accepted that even though John Cooper has an incredibly non-traditional background, he's an incredibly smart guy. But their impacts and the moments that we have seen them matter more than anything are about the way that they interact with their players. It's not about what they're drawing on a whiteboard. And I don't necessarily – I know that that's incredibly reductive, but I think it's also fair. Mm-hmm. the things that make coaches great aren't just tactics, because there are some incredibly smart coaches, tactics-wise, who cannot be head coaches. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to say. So it's actually really funny because it all leads into something I like, because I missed you, and like I'm like 7. I was like typing little notes of questions I wanted to ask you, and one of them was literally what we're talking about right now. Off the top of your head, how many teams are there in the league where the coach is the number one thing holding them back from being a legitimate contender? By which I mean a legitimate expectation of making the conference finals. So while you think about that, I want to just point out, when we talk about tactics and coaching, most fans and people who observe the game, the two things that they look at the most are matchups and line changes. Or not line, and lineup tweaks. Those are the two things that most people look at, right? Maybe you look at time of ice a little bit, but usually it's, well, they had this lineup against that lineup out there the entire night. What the fuck? Or it's, well, they should have played this guy on this line or whatever. Or they matched up this line with that guy and they went at him all night and they rode the hot hand. And then this guy moved up to here and it made both lines better and blah, blah, blah. Those are small parts of a larger vision. And I think the fact that it has to be that obvious that for fans to like notice it sometimes is exactly to your point, where it's very hard to identify the impact that a coach is having on a team beyond vibes-based shit. Mm-hmm. Teams playing hard, teams playing with structure, guys looking like they know what they're supposed to be doing, even if they're bad.
Yeah,
but they know what they're supposed to be doing. Like,
there's a few teams you can look at and they play a certain way. Mm-hmm. Right? And maybe that's where you kind of get, and it's two of the guys you already talked about. I mean, everybody knows how Carolina plays and the way they play and the structure that they play. There's a set way that the Hurricanes play, like Hurricanes hockey. That's how they play. Uh-huh. The Lightning are another team that are exactly like that. Vegas under Bruce Cassidy, they've built an identity of how they play. And Vegas has kind of always had this identity since they've come under the head coaches they've had. But, those are a few teams that they kind of have a set way that they play. You know what to expect from them, and they do it at such a high level that you can't, even though you know what they're going to do, you know how they're going to play. It's not, and I know every team has a style of the way they play, but there's a few teams that it's identifiable. Like if you asked people, what teams do you kind of know their systems, but just based on how they play, and I feel like Carolina is one of those teams that's kind of right at the top of that list, right? But I don't even remember where I was going at this point. But on your question, like I can't name one really off the top of my head of a coach that's holding a team back that I can look at and say he's the reason they haven't gotten to a conference final, right? Like I was trying to say maybe Edmonton, but even then, like I can't really put the blame all on the head coach there. So maybe the Rangers, but like it's hard. It's hard to say that the head coach is the reason that this team is getting head back, and it goes to the point that you said, because it's hard to quantify their impact on the team and the team's success, especially in hockey.
No, I think that's right. I think it's really, really hard. Like, I think you can point at Toronto. I think you can point at Edmonton. And I think you can maybe point at Boston, depending on how you feel about them.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think I'm ready yet for Boston, just because they had such an exceptional regular season,
right?
And it just happened. If it's a few seasons in and it keeps happening with them, then fine. I think to your point with Edmonton and Toronto, it makes sense because it's repeated now. Lack of success in the playoffs with different coaches, and it's the coaches holding them back. They've got exceptional players. Toronto's very evident, I think, in that sense. They've gone through several goaltenders, and we've said goaltending is the issue. The core of the team is still there. It just hasn't worked. For Sheldon Keefe hasn't been able to get this team playing the way they should, as people expect them to be one of the best teams in the NHL. So maybe that's the prime example of a coach clearly holding his team back. But because they do go on runs, they have the talent.
They were a good team.
Yeah.
And that's I think the thing for me, right? So like it's interesting because like we're having this conversation about coaching, and this is something I was thinking about, and it's just like this weird holding two ideas in my head at the same time, which is that one, having a good head coach is incredibly important for your organization to be functional and to have a basic understanding of like team structure and all these kinds of things, like conceptually, right? Like not they have to have it. Like these are things that come from having a good head coach. And on the other hand, also understanding that there is only so much influence a head coach can have on a team. And I believe that influence can only be the most evident when a team is at the highest level talent-wise, or the lowest level talent-wise, where you're like, look, they suck, but they play a mean game and they win games they shouldn't.
Yeah.
You go, that's a coaching thing. And then you have teams, that are really, really good, and you're like, yeah, this team is really, really good, and the thing that makes them terrifying is that their head coach knows what he's doing. Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's weird to try to like understand how important having a head coach is while also understand the limitations of how much influence in terms of, kind of night-to-night wins and losses that they can have. And lineup decisions matter. Roster, you know what I mean? Like, but they're also working with so much. There's a person above them who decides what players that they can and can't put in the lineup in a lot of senses. And I know it's a more amenable relationship, but fundamentally, if Pat Verbeek is like, no, I don't want this guy up, I'm sending him down, the coach can't, fucking veto him like that. It's okay, cool, thanks. I mean, that's just the way that it goes.
Yeah.
So it's just a weird thing, and it's just something I've been thinking about because the way the Dallas Eakins experience kind of ended left a sour taste in my mouth. Just because I love him so much, and I think he was so good for this franchise, and how many different and I think there are things that he brought to this franchise that will show fruit down the line, and it was also clearly time for it to stop.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be hard with hockey to quantify, how much effect a head coach has on, the success on a nightly basis, as much as it is in other sports, because of the profile of player and the matchups that you get in different sports, right? Where you can see what something goes wrong. You can see if it goes wrong a little bit more, where, again, if you line up, you have the wrong guy, defending somebody in the NBA, and clearly it's a mismatch. You could be like, well, that's on the coach. He said this, this guy's going to guard this guy, and it didn't work out, and he dropped 50 on us. We lost the game because of that. You can kind of see where it went wrong, or the way you set up defensively, or whatever, the way you defended this player, this team's scheme, or whatever. Like, you can see where the errors went wrong, and you can kind of put that on the head coach of getting outplayed tactically in that game. It's so much harder in hockey to justify that, where you've got 6 defensemen you're rolling out there. A lot of times your 7th and 8th guys are nowhere near at the same quality as the 6 guys you're rolling out anyway, right? So you're going to roll these 6 guys most of the time no matter what, unless there's an injury. So there is no way to kind of mismatch that. The way you can kind of get into that, and it's still relatively new for hockey, is looking at the matchups for that game. Who did they decide to match up against Connor McDavid? Did it work out? Did they get caved in? So you can kind of look at it that way. But it's
also like it's good. Like, how good are the players? How good are the other options? Like,
what options? Like for the Ducks, where everybody gets on lining up Derek Grant against Connor McDavid. What else do you have, right? Like, what else do you have to line up against those guys?
If you want to say, like, I think this player would be okay, great, but it's also worth acknowledging Anaheim doesn't have a good answer,
and not many teams do.
I mean?
So
no, that's exactly right. Like, that's why he's who he is. And so, again, this is what I'm talking about. Like, just the whole thing with him at the end, it got so toxic in Anaheim, because it was so frustrating and it was so ugly, and there was just all these different things that were weird, and transitions are always weird in sports, and
and in hockey too, you get like the advantage of like the last change and being able to actively change lines without having to stop play, right? Like it's the only sport you get to be able to do that without having the stoppage in play to change lines out. So it becomes a real kind of jumbled mess to say, okay, I can't get my matchup out there right now. The lines change was a good line change. They got a guy out there at the right time. The mismatch, and again, some of that's on coaching, some of that's just on pure timing and luck and the way the game is going at that point that you're able to get that line out. And again, the coach makes the right decision to throw that line out. He recognizes that this line's caught out there for a certain amount of time, and they're going to take advantage of that. And some of that is on coaching, but it's so hard to catch that and track that and quantify that and put that on the head coach and say that's the head coach's, that's all on him in that situation, right? It's very difficult, as much as, like I said, it is in hockey or soccer to look at it. I matched up my right winger against their left back and he outplayed him, and that's a tactical choice that paid off for me based off the profile of the players. And the same, again, in the NBA, I matched this guy against this guy, and that matchup was in my favor, and it turned out better for me, so that's my decision that paid off.
Do we have any Chelsea fan listeners?
I hope not.
Because I was just thinking, when you were just thinking of like matchups where you're just like, yeah, that worked. Remember when Ander Herrera for like a season just kept fucking, oh my God, why can't I think of his name all of a sudden? The Belgian winger.
Hazard?
Who played for Chelsea. Hazard. He kept Hazard in his pocket for like a whole season. There were like 4 matchups, and Hazard was like fucking invisible. Oh, it was so good. It was like Ander Herrera was just like, yeah, I'm for 4 games this year, the best defensive midfielder ever. I was like, hell yeah. That was so cool. I miss the Ander Herrera experience. Who's in Ander Herrera for the Ducks? That's
right
I think,
now
the
or
important question.
over time?
Oh, let's say over the last 10 years.
Well, would it not be Ryan Kessler in that sense of just being able to
No,
put something,
absolutely
put
not.
something
Ryan
in your
Kessler was
pocket?
way better than Ander Herrera. Silverberg is closer.
Yeah, Cogliano.
Maybe Cogliano.
Yeah, Cogliano's not
Oh, I'm annoyed now. Now I'm really annoyed. I think it might be Silverberg. Silverberg's offense was a little bit higher. Ander Herrera had a hell of a knack for scoring goals.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see Silverberg. I think Cogliano's a little bit too low for that.
Cogliano's like
He's the passenger on that.
what do you call it? Who is the?
James.
He's like a. Huh? Shut the fuck. We're not talking anymore. I'm not talking anymore. This podcast is over. We're canceling it. We're breaking up. I'm not talking to these people anymore. This Welsh slander, the greatest Welsh winger in the history of Manchester United, and this is how you speak about him. But yeah, so the coaching thing's gonna be weird. It's gonna be fun. I think we had a good talk right now about just how, I don't know.
Yeah, we
trying to analyze the situation.
I want to hear more of that. We did cover that a lot more too, and a lot of similar points. But I know we hit on some more. I believe it would have been on the last episode we did where we talked about coaching, where we talked about the differences and how hard it is to kind of judge tactically how a coach does in the NHL and some of the more options that the Ducks have. To be their next head coach. So check out that episode too, because we go into that in more detail if you want to hear more of kind of that conversation without us kind of rehashing now a lot of what we talked about before. The only other two things we had, I don't know if you want to cover them or not. Kyle Dubas getting fired. We kind of chatted a bit about that. But
here's what we're going to do. You're going to make your Stanley Cup final predictions, and we're going to get out of here because it's like 7 a.m. in the morning where you are, and you already had a long day yesterday.
We'll so before that, the next thing we're going to cover, we're going to do the prospect season review. We'll probably end up rambling about the Coyotes arena situation on that episode anyway, because we'll have some time. But we're going to go through in depth all the Ducks prospects, pretty much. Like, there's a few guys I excluded off the list, more so on the forward side of things, just because there was a lot of guys that just are honestly projecting not to make the Ducks roster. Cover most of the defensemen, I think, except one. And then pretty much all the Ducks goaltending prospects, except Ole Eriksson, because he just signed in the SHL. So we're going to go through all of those guys, cover how their seasons went, if they improved, if they kind of regressed, and what that means for next year, where they're going to play for next year. So that's going to be the next episode that we do, hopefully soon. I always say it'll be next, and then I end up having to make Steven reschedule 3 times. So hopefully soon we'll be doing this one. And then a draft another draft preview, hopefully with a guest for that one, where we can get some people on smarter than us to talk about Adam Fantilli and Leo Carlsson. And what they think on that gap, and then who the Ducks could get kind of if they move into late in the first round or with some of their second round picks. So that will be something we want to get before the draft as well.
Yeah, and if you're going to do your bit about all the stuff we're not going to do, then I'm going to do my bit about all the people I'm excited to talk to. I was just talking to somebody the other day, actually, about coming on the podcast and shooting the shit for a little bit. Someone I think would be a lot of fun to talk to, knows about Coyotes and such. Be an interesting conversation.
Let's do it.
Beyond that,
but what Stanley Cup picks? Sorry,
Stanley Cup picks.
I ignored it completely.
That's fine.
Panthers in 6. I think that it's just the Cinderella story. It's too
I need
much.
I need it to be Florida.
So do I, but I honestly I
need it to be
as much
Florida.
as I want it so much to be Florida. I genuinely think they'll do it. I just think the run they're on, the way Bob's playing, what Tkachuk's doing, how they've all kind of bought in, it just feels like they're gonna do it. Like they're just one of those destiny type teams. They're gonna get it done. And it's not like Vegas has been that commanding either. Their run.
I don't know, man. They beat the shit out of Dallas. They embarrassed the shit out of Dallas.
But a lot of guys didn't show up for Dallas either, and they did. But they beat the shit out of Winnipeg and Edmonton to get there. So
no, that's not unfair. Yeah. I don't, but I just
they're good. They deserve to be there. There's just something about this Panthers team that would be very disappointing to see them bow out here.
God, yeah. I'll. You know what? I will go Panthers in 5.
Yeah, I could see it, man.
Fuck it.
I just
If we do, I'm buying a Tkachuk jersey.
The only factor here. And maybe it's not even a factor because the Panthers had to go into some of the hardest buildings in the NHL, Carolina, Boston, Toronto, and win games, and they won games. Going into Vegas is not easy, and they have to go into Vegas for 2 games to start to try and win. But I don't know, man. There's just something about this Panthers team, the way they're playing. I'd really like to see Matthew Tkachuk get Conn Smythe Stanley Cup. He deserves it, I think, more than anybody in the playoffs, and I'd love to see Bob have the nice cap off redemption story here and win a Stanley Cup because he's been unbelievable. So I'm all in on the Panthers. I hope they win, and I just like all of us probably feel we don't want to see Vegas win it either. So
what's funny is I was thinking about it, and Vegas feels like, maybe since the Red Wings. But I don't think that's quite right because I think the Red Wings always had much more significant stars. But Vegas feels very Steelersy to me, where it's just it doesn't really matter who's on the roster. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of they're the athlete, they're just kind of a villain.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it kind of doesn't really because
there's no player on the roster. There's no.
It should be Jack Eichel. It should have been Mark Stone. Shea Theodore is great, but we kind of grow tired of all of them. Kind of.
There's just nobody you hate. You know what I mean? You're not hating anybody. You're not I hate this team because I hate this guy. The Ducks were a part of that for a long time. I hate this. Everybody hates the Ducks because they hate Corey Perry and they hate the way they play and I don't think anybody really hates specific players on Vegas. Or the way they play.
Most people still get mad at Ryan Reeves.
Yeah, or the way they play, or this or that. It's just everybody hates them because they're new and they've had success right off the bat, and it's just universally because of that has generated this mass hate across the NHL from fans that they hate.
Good for the sport.
Yeah, that they hate them because they haven't suffered. And listen, everybody knows it. I talked to Jaden today. I was telling her about how Vegas made. The finals, and she's like, haven't they made the finals every year? Aren't they always there? And I'm like, yeah, pretty much, yeah, they are. Everybody kind of notices it. They're just kind of always there within the mix. This is their second final in 5 years of existence. They've had a conference final loss before that. They lost in the first round, and then they missed the playoffs last year. So 4 out of 5 years, they've made the playoffs. 3 out of 5 years, they've made it to at least the conference final, and now 2 out of 5 years, they've made the final. Right,
they're absurd, bro. It's so good for the sport to have a villain like that, and in Vegas, which is a place that's easy to hate.
It's funny too. Is Seattle kind of roughly is doing the same thing, but they suffered so much in the first 2 years.
Yeah, they were so bad that first. I also apparently though the other part of it is it's like if you have Martin Jones, we just expect the bottom to fall out.
Yeah, well,
and
you're so bad.
They were
for
like,
the
we're
first
playing
year,
Martin
so
Jones
it's okay.
20 games.
You're so bad.
Dude, goalies were bad all year.
Yeah.
Their goalies were never good.
No,
that's the thing about that team that was so wild, is the goalies were never good.
Yeah, if this was Seattle's first year and they did this in their first year, I feel like you'd be getting kind of similar hate to Vegas. Vegas lost in the first round in their first year. Like Seattle making it to the second round if it was their first year and they hadn't suffered, I feel like we'd be kind of getting in that same territory to be like, well, here we go again. Expansion team comes in, gets gifted a great team. They're in the playoffs right off the bat. They're not suffering, but it feels a little bit less like that and more of a feel-good story because they suffered and they got Beniers and they added, well in free agency and trades, not from the expansion draft, essentially. They did have some good pickups in the expansion draft, but they've added in other areas and made good moves. And it looks like they built it, I don't want to say the right way because it's not fair because Vegas didn't do anything wrong, but people feel better about it because they suffered and because the moves came outside the expansion draft that they're okay with it. And everybody loved that Seattle was making their run and was cheering them on and whatever. And Vegas has just become universally hated because of the instant success that they had. And the increase in success over the first 3 seasons. Like I said, lost in the first round, lost in the conference finals, made the Stanley Cup finals. That was their first 3 years of existence. Just continued.
And they made the Stanley Cup finals in their first year.
Did they?
Yeah.
I thought that.
No, they played Washington their very first year.
Okay, well then.
Because that was when fucking Derek England was out for all the captain shit.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But yeah.
Just what a time to be alive.
Just
Derek England, NHL captain. God bless.
Love it. Yeah, I don't know, but Florida, please, Matthew Kachuk,
definitely.
please. I sent you that 7-year anniversary of Chucky scoring the Memorial Cup winning goal for London. So we just need a repeat of that in this. And if anybody's going to score the game-winning goal, it's going to be him. You got to put money on that. The amount of key goals he's had in these playoffs.
We get him. We get Anton Lundell, Josh Mahura, Brandon Montour.
Yeah.
Sasha Barkov, your boy. Yeah. There's so many likable players on this Florida team. Aaron Ekblad, who's been 75 his entire life. Aaron Ekblad's like the Greg Oden of the NHL in that he's just looked like he was 40 his entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's stick it to Calgary and Jonathan Huberdeau that they go out and win it without him.
No, but I was again, not only did they do it after they had the greatest season in the world, this run wherever it ends, right? Not only did they do this after the season they had last year, after Jonathan Huberdeau was incredible, after the trade, but they do it by getting 2 left wingers from Calgary, one of whom delivered, and the other of whom kind of delivered, but also got run out of town by the first guy in Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk. And it's 2 of the biggest. Sam Bennett is obviously less of an important piece, but he has been a crucial piece to this team over these last couple of years. And just gotta suck if you're Calgary to just watch those 2 guys who the whole franchise had huge hope for. One of whom absolutely delivered on it, MVP caliber season. And then they go to Florida, and you're just, goddamn, so good.
And the Stahl brothers get to win a cup together.
Well, I don't care about that anymore. Those guys suck.
I'm grasping at straws here, looking at the roster, seeing any more feel-good stories.
Yeah.
There's not many.
Brothers winning shit together is cool.
No, Barkov lifted the cup too, and
Radko Gudas, Stanley Cup champion. Fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me?
Yes. Please. Did he not win with Tampa, or did he leave Tampa before they won?
He left Tampa before they won.
Oh, man. Redemption story.
Dude, he's had such a weird career.
Where was he before Tampa? Washington?
Philly.
I thought he was at Philly after Tampa.
Oh, was it Washington, Tampa, Philly?
That's what I feel like.
Oh, that might have been right.
Now I gotta riveting stuff here at the end, but now I gotta see. No, it was Tampa, Philly, Washington, and then Florida.
Why I shouldn't listen to you. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. Radko, man, he left Tampa before they got.
What was he, like a 5th round pick, 6th round pick?
3rd round pick.
That's right.
Number 66 overall in 2010. Now he's played 682 games. That's a win.
Ooh, okay, wait. Okay, Radko Gudas in 682 games.
Are you trying to guess how many points or PIMs?
We're going to do all 3. We're going to see if we can go 3 for 3.
Okay, wait.
So I'm going to say he has
Let's do this the right way.
15 goals.
No. Higher.
Higher or lower?
Higher.
25.
Higher.
50.
No, hello.
37.
33. He's got
33 career goals.
Do you know what his career high is in one season?
Ooh, probably like 12.
Oh no, 6.
Oh,
He went 2, 3, 2, 5, 6, 2, 4, 2, 2, 3, 2. So
I always like when guys are like 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 12, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. It's just like, yeah, they had 1 year where they got a third of their career.
This guy was on one in Philly. In 4 seasons, he had 17 of his 33 goals. So,
oh my goodness, sir, slow down.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on there. Okay, points now.
Assists.
Nah, just 2 points. Just 2 points.
2 points?
Yeah. He had 33 goals in 682 games.
275.
It's a lot lower than that.
180?
Close. 164.
Oh my goodness. Dude, a 5th of his career points are goal. Well, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
I would have assumed he'd gotten more than that. Okay, and PIMS, career PIMS. 682 games. I'm going to say 821.
Yeah, really close. 843.
Damn it.
Do you know? What do you think his season high in PIMS is?
He probably got up to like what, 140 1 year?
Yeah.
With a couple of fights, a couple of misconducts.
152 in his 2nd season in the league. This is probably his best year.
Was that Toronto?
Nope. Tampa.
Tampa. Sorry, yeah. That was when he was murdering.
3 goals, 22 points, 152 PIMS.
He's a king, bro.
And then
he's a king.
He had a really good season in Philly too, where he had 6 goals, 23 points in 67 games and 93 PIMs.
Does he have a plus minus below -10?
Oh, it's his plus minus is positive.
But just in all of his seasons.
No, he only has 2. He only has 2 negative seasons. Both in Tampa. No, 1 in Tampa, 1 in Philly. -5 in Tampa in 31 games. -3 in Tampa in 76 games.
Dude, he's so good.
Last
year,
he was a
plus is a fake
27.
stat, but the underlying numbers also have always borne out that he's an incredibly strong defensive player. So it's just funny that even the plus minus and like all of it, like you're just like, yeah, this dude has quietly been one of the best 4th defenseman in the league for a long time.
I would love to go watch some highlights of Radko Gudas's AHL exploits.
Oh my God!
I just have to do the quick math here, but his PIMS in the amount of games he had in the AHL. So he had 567 PIMS in 3 seasons. And remember 567, so I can do the math here. Plus 70. So you had 567 PIMs in 206 games.
Dude, that is Drew Hunter shit.
207 penalty minutes was his highest season.
God damn it, did it.
207 penalty minutes in 57 games with the Syracuse Crunch in the 2012-2013 season. He had 20 points.
So in hopes of finding what would be one of the funniest occurrences in the world, I was hoping, and I looked and I couldn't find it, I was hoping at some point him and Zenon Konopka's paths had crossed, because that fight would just be all bombs. That would be like an old school all bombs fight. Oh, that'd be so good.
we-
Anyways, get the hell out of here.
We
It's
just
like
need
7:30
to
in the morning.
have Radko Gudas and Hunter Drew on a podcast. Radko Gudas needs to come on and explain how he had 207 PIMs in 50 plus games in the AHL, and we still
Being a
need
fucking
Hunter
legend.
Drew to come on and explain how he had 111 PIMs, 9 goals, 16 points in 20 games in the Slovakian Hockey League.
Again, he's a goddamn legend. That's all. What a champion.
Just like what
man.
a
hero.
stat line that is. So he had 20 games played, 9 goals, 16 points, 111 PIMs, and a -6.
Bro, I think I might need to go get a jersey for whatever fucking team that was. Like a Hunter Drew jersey.
Bystrisha HC05 in the Slovak Hockey League. I don't know if he played defense or forward, but I know he put up almost a point per game and over 5 PIMs per game.
Oh my god. Banksa Bystrica. Alright, Banksa Bystrica. I'm gonna see if I can find some fucking gear. We're gonna see if we can make it happen. Because if I can get a Hunter Drew jersey. Oh.
He played D that year. Yeah, he's listed as defenseman, so.
Yeah, of course he did. They didn't fucking try to make him a fucking forward until he got here.
I love it. What I love even more is the next highest guy on the team in PIMs was 79. So he had a full 30 PIMs more than the next highest guy.
Hey, the Banksa logo is gnarly. It's a goat or like a ram. Yo, this is fantastic.
Interesting about that season. Noted top 10 pick potentially in this year's draft. Dalibor Dvorsky played on that team. And okay, do we know if Hayden Verbeek is related to Pat Verbeek?
I don't know. Let me go to the hospital.
Sorry, I'm just getting well into the role.
No. This is the stuff that matters.
He played 4 games for that team that year, so he would have witnessed.
It's fine now.
This is the longest lasting saga I think we have on this show of trying to find out everything we can about that season Hunter Drew had in Slovakia.
Mm-hmm. Why doesn't it say?
What you know would be?
It's always
Pat Verbeek is his uncle.
Uncle, yeah. His father is Brian.
This is basically what we have to do. Is we just have to go down the list of teammates of his, and get everybody's take on what he was doing that season until eventually he has no choice but to come on the show and explain it himself.
This is our story to tell. Oh my goodness. Okay.
The story that absolutely nobody beyond us cares about.
That's fine. It's not the point.
But we need to go down the list. And
9-7 with 111 PIMs and a -6. What a fucking legend.
There's got to be somebody on this team that will come on this show, and we got to ask them about what's going on, and then put in a good word to our boy Hunter Drew and get him on the show, and figure out what happened.
Fucking terrible news. There's not a goddamn single American on this thing. It's just a bunch of Czech dudes, some Canadian dudes, a Swedish dude, and
this is where we get Hayden Verbeek on and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because then now we have a direct connection to Pat Verbeek, and then he only played 4 games for that team, but I'm sure he has some great memories of Hunter Drew pounding the shit out of somebody in those 4 games.
Oh, it's got to be so good. Okay, all right, we have to do this.
Yes, it's getting late.
It's like 11:30.
But anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. It would be us without almost a 2.5-hour show. So
Jesus
I hope
Christ,
you're watching
rock.
this in 3 sittings or on a very long commute to work. We'll be back soon.
Please don't watch it if you're driving.
Yeah, don't.
Just listen.
Just listen. We'll be back with our prospect season review coming up soon. More draft talk coming a little bit closer to the draft, probably like mid-June. We'll get somebody on to give their take on who the Ducks could take at 2, and with their multitude of second-round picks. Then we'll do some other stuff. That's all I can say. We'll do some other stuff. We'll figure out some stuff.
We'll get there.
We got lots of stuff planned for the summer. And typical us fashion, it will just be random stuff. Might have nothing to do with the Ducks. It might. We'll find some way to spin it to do with the Ducks, like
now we're cooking.
Yeah, like we did with our hockey jersey, soccer jersey show. I can't remember exactly.
That was fun.
Where the only way we tied it to the Ducks is we showed them a Ducks jersey. So
yeah, exactly. Hey, we made it work.
So yeah, expect lots of that. But for sure, the next show up is the prospect season review. That's the one we have to get to, and that we'll hopefully be doing in the next week or so here. And yeah, that one will probably be 2 hours too, because why not? Why not?
Yeah, why wouldn't it be? We're going to spend 45 minutes talking about Bo Gruel.
Yeah, he's first up. So, and you know who's not on the list? Who's aged out? Hunter Drew. So, sorry about your luck there.
You're such an
asshole. I don't
asshole.
think you can be 28 and be a prospect anymore. I think the moment you put up 100 plus PIMs in 20 games, you're not a prospect anymore. You're
in a professional
you're
league.
You're a man. You're a man. You're not a prospect anymore.
You're a grown ass man.
All right, guys, we're done. We'll see you guys soon. Appreciate you guys listening to whatever the last 15 minutes of the show was there. And
yeah, the last 15 minutes. That's the problem.
Yeah. And we'll talk to you guys soon.
Bye.